Talk to me, Queen.
Hey, brother, how you doing?
Peace and black power to you. How you doing, my sister? Talk to me.
Peace
hey,
and
we can't see you.
power.
We want to see you.
Let me see. Here I am.
Yeah, let us. There you go. There you go. Show yourself. How you doing, my sister? Can you give the people, you know, a little bit of your background and what is your scholarship in? What is your major in? You have a degree. What is your background? What have you been studying in college, sister? Talk to me.
Okay, so for many of you guys, if you aren't aware, my name is Nyah Amara, and my primary background is in psychology and counseling. I have a bachelor's in liberal studies. I have a master's in business and another master's in psychology, and I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Missouri. I've been a counselor for about 12 years, and basically what I focus on, community, family, and child psychology. And so what my overall goal is to help Black people and people in general suffering in African-American communities as a result of poverty understand our condition, so then we can go out and make better decisions regarding what we need to do to overcome a lot of the barriers that we see as it relates to single parent households, drugs, Black-female relationships, abortions, and psychology. So I talk about a variety of issues, but my primary focus is community health.
All right, my sister. So what qualifies you to talk about this subject that we're talking about, as far as where do Europeans come from? How did they get here? Are they African? Was they made in a laboratory? What qualifies you to deal with this topic?
Well, you know, for the most part, I'm a student, and I think what qualifies me is, again, I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I deal with the psychology of people. In order to deal with psychology, you have to deal with the culture of people, because you want to be culturally relevant all the time. So I just study history. So I call myself a historian. I study history. I study people, Europeans, I study Asians, and I study culture. So I've been doing this for about 2.5 years. I think that my ability to apply and understand scientific methodology helps me. But, you know, I think my higher education in psychology has definitely been important in my overall development in this topic.
Okay, powerful. To let the family know, this is Sister Nyah, and she is a member of the Army Raw Squad. So you already know she knows something in order to be a member of the Army Raw Squad. She got to know something. And say what's up to your co-worker over there, Dr. Maat in the building. Say what's up to her.
Yeah, Dr. Maat, me and Dr. Maat, I'm thankful to have her on the show with me. I called her. I was like, you want to go with Sinetta with me? Because she's always so clear and organized, and she really helps me to develop my concepts because she forces me and asks really hard questions to make me. It's a pleasure to have her on the show. You know that she's serious in mathematics and methodology and research. So if ever I say something and I'm not applying appropriate methods, or I'm not presenting information correctly, I know she's going to be there to help me out. So I'm glad to have her here.
Okay.
On this video.
Dr. Maat, how you doing, my sister?
Peace and power to you, my brother Sinetta.
Can you let the family know, give them a little information on who you are, what you represent, and
Absolutely.
What qualifies you to talk about this subject at hand?
Absolutely, brother. But Sinetta, I want to salute you first, brother. I want to say peace and power to you.
Thank you.
I want to say peace and power to my sister, Nyah, a beautiful, beautiful, very bright and very intelligent sister, and she is more than qualified to speak on this topic. She's done a lot of great research. In fact, we were chopping it up. Over the past couple of weeks, we kind of been chopping it up about Europeans, and we were going back and forth with the squad members on whether or not Europeans are fundamentally African. And the sister's very sharp. And I'm looking forward to this discourse. I just want to say, before I even introduce who I am, I want to say peace and power to your listening audience, brother Sinetta. Anybody that's in the chat room under the sound of my voice, anybody that may be listening to this in the archives, I want to at least acknowledge them and say peace and power to them, brother Sinetta.
Okay, so what qualifies you, Dr. Maat, to talk on this subject right now that we're talking about? You yourself are a member of the Army Raw Squad, so you definitely got to know something being on the Army Raw Squad with them brothers. So talk to us about that.
No doubt. Army Raw Squad up.
Right.
Peace to the brothers on the squad. Yes, I am a certified doctor. So you asked me what qualifies me. Well, my degree is in STEM, Sinetta, and STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math. I graduated in 2003 from Morgan State University. In fact, I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in electrical engineering. So as an engineer, I had to take virtually almost every science course that they had to offer at Morgan. I had to take biology, I had to take chemistry, I had to take physics 205 and physics 206. And I also had to take a bunch of math, you know, from algebra to pre-calc, calc 1, calc 2, calc 3, geometry. We had to take probability and statistics, differential equations, linear algebra. So my degree is in the STEM field. In 2013, I graduated with a doctorate of engineering from Morgan State University. So what qualifies me is, if anyone knows anything about engineering, engineering teaches you how to think. I know a lot of us believe, Sinetta, that we think, but thinking is skill. Okay. And it's a skill that is taught to you. So many of us believe that we think and we don't think. Okay. So engineering taught me how to critically think. It taught me how to solve problems. And as an engineer, we solve problems utilizing science, mathematics, and methodology. So what qualifies me to speak on this subject is the fact that I'm a critical thinker, I am a problem solver, and I am a scientist, a qualified scientist, and a mathematician. Okay, so no, I'm not a geneticist. I'm not a Rick Kittles, but I'm definitely in the field of STEM. Okay,
my sister. So let's get right to it. We got Sekhmet to be here in a minute. She's still out there doing what she do in the community service, you know, and so what we're going to do right now is let's get right to it. There's so many thoughts out there on where the European come from. Some people say he was created in the laboratory. We still know about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's theory. Some people say he walked up out of Africa and walked into Europe during the ice period. He got stuck over there through the ice period in chains and the climax. And, you know, all kinds of crazy theories going on.
Right.
So I want to hear, and then, you know, we got the Bible theory.
Right.
He came out of Adam and Eve. He came, how they say, he came out of the womb, and the Most High separated them in the womb. One came out as Esau, one came out this. But before we go there, I want to first introduce Sister Empress Sekhmet. How you doing, my sister?
Peace, my brothers. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Introduce yourself to the family. Let the people know what's up, who you are.
Woohoo! I'm so excited to be on the panel with these sisters tonight. Y'all don't even know. I am so excited to be on the panel with these sisters tonight. I'm so excited to be black. I'm so excited to be alive. I want to say peace to the chat. Y'all already know what it is. It's Empress Sekhmet, black motherfucking power. It's a glorious day when the sisters can come together and show real sisterhood and real scholarship. Who I am. Well, most people know me for Open Season on the Cracker. Y'all already know what that's about. But I have a degree in botany. I also have a bachelor's in science and accounting. I run a mobile food pantry. I run a mobile reading truck. I counsel. I teach. I teach entrance to botany at a community college out here on Long Island. I'm really grassroots organizer. I've been working in grassroots organizing of impoverished Black communities for over 20 years. I have over 500,000 hours of study of the atrocities committed against so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. So this is my life. What qualifies me to talk about this subject? Because I hate them, because I can't stand them. And when you can't stand something, you have to know everything about it to be able to defeat it. See? So if you don't like something, you have to know it just as much as you know yourself. because how can you come against something if you don't know anything about it? So that's what qualifies me. My disdain for the atrocities that they have been committing, my disdain for the murders of unarmed blacks by the oppressor, my disdain for the non-reparations, the being left behind for having no voices. So my disdain for this cracker, for this beast, is what qualifies me.
Okay, thank you. Now we want to jump right in. Which one of y'all want to tackle this first? Dr. Maat, Sister Nyah. Like I was saying, so many people still confused about where this European come from. So which one, what do y'all think would be appropriate to set the tone, set the stage first, and let's attack this issue head on? I think the brothers and Unc and Wu Jaru, they are all watching right now. But I think the brothers and Solomon too, I think the brothers kind of failed yesterday. They done a good job in dropping the science, but I think they failed in giving us the proper information on where do the Europeans come from. So I'm hoping my sisters can bring it out, and let's go with y'all. Who want to attack this first?
Okay, so I'll go first.
Let me quickly say that I got about 50 more people to feed. So I'm on the line and I'm listening, but I may not chime in until I'm done with this. It's going to take me another 30 minutes. So I'm here, and I definitely have some questions for the sisters as well, but I got about 50 more people to feed y'all, but I'm here with you.
All right. Thank you, sister. All right. Sister Nyah.
Okay, so I just want to say thanks for allowing us to be on the panel, Dr. Sinetta. I called you. I'm like, I want to talk about evolution, and you gave me the opportunity. But before we get started, I just want to set the tone, because me and Dr. Maat, we spent some time going over the points that we wanted to talk about today. And the reason why we're talking about this is because we need greater clarity. A lot of the confusion as it relates to who we are as Black people is a result of faulty information. And so we just want to clarify. The first thing we want to clarify is that this hangout is not about whether or not all life began in Africa.
That's right.
This is a point that has already been proven. It is a point that we are not disputing. We stand by the out of Africa theory, and we understand that all human life started in Africa. The next thing we want to do is we want to define species. We want to talk about our genus, our species. We want to talk about the history of race, the biological versus the social construction of race, human diversity and what that is. And we want to talk about the out of Africa theory versus the regional continuity theory.
Yes.
When and why did our white people's skin turn pale, SLC 2485. We want to talk about the Sarah gene and some other genes that are unique to the individuals we call European or white people. We want to talk about the first Europeans. And then lastly, we're going to close it out by discussing, are we all Europeans? Or we're going to discuss, are Europeans African? So that's the last point.
Absolutely.
So Dr. Maat, you want to go ahead with the first point?
Okay, so as my sister stated, and I'm getting ready to show my screen, I'm actually looking for that new article, sis, while you were talking, that was published by National Geographic, but that came out this April. So I was looking for that, but let me share my screen really briefly with you all. So, all right, Brother Sinetta, let me know if you can see my screen. Sister Nyah, let me know if you can see my screen.
We see it.
Okay, so as Sister Nyah just stated, we totally agree. And where's my phone so I can bring up the points? So, okay, so we're not opposing that all life began in Africa. Like, this is old news, okay? They, in 1988, Newsweek dropped the bombshell when they released when they published this magazine, okay? And they had an article in here called The Search for Adam and Eve, all right? And in this article, molecular biologists, okay, they looked at an international assortment of genes. Now, this is back in 1988. So we're talking 30 years ago. Molecular biologists looked at an international assortment of genes and they picked up a trail of DNA that led them to a single woman from whom we all descended. Okay. And most of the evidence that they gathered thus far states that Eve, this is what they called her. They said that she was sub-Saharan African. So she was a sub-Saharan African woman. Now, these scientists at this time did not claim to have found the first woman, merely just a common ancestor. And last night, I think that Brother Ankh and Brother Wujawu did a great job in explaining what a common ancestor is. And that's why you have the different haplogroups and things of that nature. But anyway, these scientists did not claim to have found the first woman, merely just a common ancestor, possibly one from the time when modern humans arose. And they estimate that this Eve lived about 200,000 years ago. So they did this based on DNA in 1988. So again, we're not refuting that all life began in Africa. That is not our argument, okay? So they proved it via DNA, and they've also proved it with fossils. I know that Brother Ankh always talks about Omo 1 and Omo 2, the bones that they found by the Omo River in Ethiopia in 1967, okay? So in Ethiopia, by the Omo River in 1967, there was a team that was led by Richard Leakley, and they found 2 skulls and some bones on opposite sides of this river, okay? And they dubbed these skulls and bones Omo 1 and Omo 2. Now, at that time in 1967, they dated these skulls and bones to about 130,000 years ago. They said that these bones were like 130,000 years old, okay? But in 2005, they used new dating techniques that indicated that the fossils were 65,000 years older than what they initially thought in 1967, okay? So now they're saying that these fossils are 190,000 years old, okay? So again, we had the data, and we have the DNA and the fossils to prove that life began in Africa. All right. So we're not here to refute that tonight. So as my sister Nyah said, and Sister Nyah, do you want to add to this? Because I don't want to feel like I'm rambling.
No, I think you're doing an excellent job. Continue.
Okay. So we had the DNA and we had the fossils to substantiate that human life began in Africa. So we're not refuting that. And I think the brothers did a great job last night in articulating that or conveying that. All right. Now, Sister Nyah said tonight we want to define a species, because last night the brothers threw around a lot of terms. I looked at the build a little bit last night, and then I watched it earlier today. They used a lot of terms, but they did not define the terms for you. They said species. They talked about populations. They talked about genes. They talked about horizontal gene transfer, vertical gene transfer. They use a lot of terms, but no one put up slides actually defining these terms except for Wujawu. And I love how that brother, matter of fact, he put up the taxonomy of humans. So he showed you this chart last night, and we're going to get to that. But other than that, I think the brothers utilized a lot of terms, but they didn't break these terms down. So when we say a species, we're merely talking about a group of organisms that can reproduce with one another in nature and produce fertile offspring. So we cannot say, Brother Sinetta, that Europeans are a different species than us, right? A species, we have to understand what a species is. Again, a species is a group of organisms that can reproduce. Europeans can reproduce, right? White people can reproduce. A group of organisms that can reproduce with one another. We can also reproduce with Europeans, right? So a group of organisms that can reproduce with one another in nature and produce fertile offspring. If I were to go sign that to have sex with a European male and we conceive, that offspring, first of all, we would be able to reproduce because we conceive, and that offspring would also will also be able to reproduce, right? But we have to be in the same species to do so. All right. So anyway, species are characterized by the fact that they are reproductively isolated, it says, from other groups, which means that the organisms in one species are incapable of reproducing with organisms in another species. So if Europeans or if Asians or if all these different populations of Homo sapiens sapiens, if we weren't in the same species, we would not be able to reproduce with them. Okay, so species are characterized by the fact that they are reproductively isolated from other groups, which means that the organisms in one species are incapable of reproducing with organisms in another species. It says this term species can also be defined as the most basic category of the system of taxonomy. Brother Wujawu talked about that last night. He gave a wonderful definition of taxonomy. I'm going to read this one from nature.com. Taxonomy is a scientific system that classifies organisms into categories based on their biological characteristics. And it says that species can also be defined based on a shared evolutionary history and ancestry. All right. And it says the method of defining species is called phylogenetics, which is the study of the evolutionary relationship among organisms. The evolutionary process by which a new species comes into being is called speciations. And I know last night the brothers also mentioned speciation. So there you have it. And they also mentioned phylogenetics. All right. So let's get this straight. A species, a group of organisms that can reproduce with one another in nature and produce fertile offspring. All right. Taxonomy, scientific system that classifies organisms into categories based on their biological characteristics. Okay. Phylogenetics, the study of evolutionary relationships among organisms. All right. And speciation is the evolutionary process by which a new species comes into being. That is what we call speciation. Okay. So last night, Brother Wujawu showed you guys the taxonomy of humans. And he said that our species is Homo sapien sapien. Okay. So at the top, and remember, he said that these are ranks. And I don't know if you guys can see me moving my cursor, but he had an arrow pointing downward, and he called these ranks. All right. So in the top rank, well, I guess if you go from bottom to top, you have species. Our species is Homo sapiens sapien. And he says members of the genus Homo with a height, forehead, and thin skull bones. Okay. Homo is our actual genus. So our genus is Homo. It says our family, we belong to hominids. Order would be primates. Class will be mammals. And I know a lot of people have an issue with, being classified. They say, oh, we're not mammals. Yes, we are. That is our class. We're classified as mammals. Okay. Our phylum, it says chordates, animals with backbones. We have a backbone. And our kingdom will be an animal. But see, Sister Nyah, a lot of people have issues with this taxonomy. They don't want to be called an animal. They don't want to say, oh, an animal or mammal or a primate. People have issues with these terms. But this is the taxonomy of human beings. Okay. And I think that Brother Wujawu did a wonderful job explaining this last night. So I won't go into it, further. But our species is Homo sapiens sapien, genus Homo, family hominids, order primates, class mammals, phylum chordates, kingdom animals. We belong to the animal kingdom. All right. Sister Nyah, do you want to add? Sister Nyah.
Unmute yourself, sis. Unmute yourself.
Is she talking, Brother Sai?
Yes.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm gonna just keep it up. Okay, so could you let me see your screen, Dr. Maat, if you can just kind of put your screen back up there.
Oh, it's up.
Okay,
so she can see it.
Yeah, so I think that it's important when we have this conversation that we properly define what a species is, because a lot of the point of contention is whether or not Europeans belong to our species. If you look at Dr. Maat's taxonomic code, you'll see that our species is called Homo. So some of the characteristics are hominids with upright posture. That's our species. In terms of African Americans, in terms of Europeans, in terms of Asians, in terms of all these groups of people, all they are called is Homo sapiens sapiens. So that's the official scientific term. So all life began in Africa, and the group that we know as Homo sapiens sapien is the group that actually went out, then diversified. So it's very important that we understand what Homo sapien is and what Homo sapiens sapien is. So if you look at this tree, you'll see that there's no specification or categories to deal with race. Now, race is a very contentious argument within our community, because of racism. And Empress was talking about all the things that we've had to endure as a result of racist white supremacist ideology. And we can't really change those things till we understand what race is. Before 1950, when UNESCO went in and started discussing race, before that, all scientists basically believed that race was determined primarily by phenotypical features. So how your nose look, your lips, your eyes, you know, your skin color. After UNESCO, it was determined that race was no longer a biological reality, but race was no longer a biological reality, but it was a result of human diversity and variation. So basically, let me get my screen up. How do I share my screen, Tanetta? Do I have to go over here?
Dr. Maat, tell her how to share the screen.
Okay, so go to your left corner, sis. You're going to see a green button. Click the green button.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
And share screen, and then click on what you want to share.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to share this right here. Entire screen. Okay. So when we look at, let me go down. When we look at race, we'll see within the biological context, the criteria for race is in biology, race is described as an isolated breeding population that shares certain characteristics in higher frequencies. Race may be generally distinct, phenotypically populations of interbreeding individuals within the same species. Genetic isolation between races is not complete, but genetic differences may have accumulated that are not yet sufficient to a separate species. So within biology, in order for race to be a reality, then there has to be sufficient time that each species or each group of people had the opportunity to separate to a point where speciation took place. So in the old days, they thought that Africans were a separate race from European. They thought that Asians were a separate race from Europeans. And some of the things that they looked at is, like I said before, their large brains, their neocortex, their prefrontal cortex, their temporal lobes, their reasoning language. They looked at all these things and they try to make the point that race was this because people are different. So one of the things that we want to talk about is we want to talk about those differences in amongst the different races. It just depends on what school of thought that you come from, and how you look at how you look at race. It depends on your background, but for the most part, most people look at Africans as Africans who remained in Africa during the migration period. A lot of you guys know that period called the out of Africa period. And so an African is generally thought of people who stayed in Africa and people who remained in Africa during the initial stages of migration of Homo sapiens sapiens. So I just wanted to kind of establish that. Dr. Maat, do you want to say anything else about that?
Yes. I want to just add, sis, that initially, because I know that we talk about the out of Africa theory a lot. And I just want to add that there definitely were conflicting theories. And I'm going to share my screen. So let me know if you see my screen, sis. Okay. So there were definitely conflicting theories. So a lot of us talk about the out of Africa theory, but all scientists, again, they weren't in the, well, with the DNA evidence and the fossil evidence, that's when a lot of scientists say, yeah, this out of Africa theory, we'll go with that. But prior to that, there were conflicting models. There's a book out, a good book that was published by Dr. Alice Roberts. It's called Evolution, The Human Story. And it was published in 2011, but let me see what page this is on. On page 177, she talks about the conflicting models. So initially, scientists subscribed to this theory called the regional continuity theory, okay, which suggests that Homo sapiens arose from earlier archaic populations in many places throughout the world. And they said that over time, these archaic populations that were in Africa, Europe, and Asia, that they developed into Homo sapiens. Okay. So in this view, the lineage is represented by like Homo ergaster, and let me go back to this, Homo ergaster, Homo erectus. I know the brothers talked about that last night, but before I even finish this statement, let me go back here. So we're talking about different types of humans in the Homo genus. Okay. So you have Homo habilis, Homo georgicus, Homo ergaster, Homo erectus, Homo antecessor, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo neanderthal, they say neanderthalensis, Homo florescensis, and Homo sapiens sapiens. So anyway, in the regional continuity theory, they're saying that these different archaic populations existed throughout the old world, and that Homo sapiens arose from these earlier archaic populations. But however, you know, when they went with the genetic research, they changed it to what they call the recent African origin model. We call it the out of Africa or the African Eve model. But they proposed a more localized point that says origin for our species. All right, because they found fossils and DNA evidence to prove that the evolution of our species in Africa. And it says that genetic evidence also supports a model of expansion, with our species emerging out of Africa and largely replacing earlier archaic populations. So there were some conflicting models, and I just wanted to let the people know that, Sister Nyah. I don't want them to think that it was just like the out of Africa theory. I want them to know that there were other theories that scientists had proposed. However, due to genetic research and also fossil findings, you know, they came up with the recent African origin model, which is termed the out of Africa theory. So I just wanted to kind of add that. That's all.
Peace, okay. My sisters. Can I interject really quick and ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. Peace, Sister Nyah. It's so good to hear your voice.
Miss you.
And see your face. Dr. Maat, same to you. I'm going to be coming with questions from the people. Coming with questions that didn't get answered from last night's build. So and just keep it there. So one of the most asked questions on this topic is the white man an African?
No, I wouldn't say.
Do we consider the white man? If we're saying that everything comes from out of Africa, this is what I'm just reading now. If we say that everyone comes from Africa, is the white man an African? Does his origin begin in Africa?
Okay. So thanks for the question, and kind of the purpose of this discussion is to build on that, and that's actually our 10th point that we wanted to make. So we will get to that, Sister Empress, but
okay, that's great. That's great.
Our last point. Yeah. So definitely.
So what I'll do is I'll hold all the questions. Mm-hmm. I'll hold all the questions from the chat and all the questions I have from online till after we get to the points.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So as you can see, Dr. Maat, she did a great job of defining species. And then we went into discussing what Homo, our genus is. And like we stated before, our genus is all the same. So Europeans have the same genus as Africans, the same genus as Homo, and our species is sapien. So yes, again, we are the same species under the definition of speciation. Now, the next point that we want to go to is the history of race, because we need to kind of talk about race and how race influences racial thinking. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we have to do, as Empress said, is that we have to understand the various tools and the mechanisms used against us to divide us, to conquer, and to prevent us from moving to the next step. So race and the idea of race was one of those mechanisms, because like I said before, in the 20th century, race was looked at more as a biological reality. But in the past 20 years, those things have made a change. So we have to begin to step away from racial thinking and look at ourselves in the cultural sense. So being African has to have consequences. Being African has to be accompanied by history. Being African has to be accompanied by a way of thinking, a certain psychology, a belief system, how we rear our children. So that has to be redefined, because for so long we've been stuck in this racialized thinking, because we've been told that we're Black people and they're white people and we're subhuman and we're subspecies. We've been manipulated into believing that narrative, that we've kind of got away from the importance of the cultural elements of race and the importance of being an African. What does that look like? What's the consequences of being a Black man? What's the consequence, if you want to say, of being a Moor or a Hebrew or a Christian? What are the consequences of all those things? So in order for us to properly understand it, we have to begin to compare the culture. And when we look at the culture and we look at European culture, you'll see that Europeans have a very distinct cultural history than we have in terms of their migration patterns out of Africa, their language, their history. So just to kind of go back, is that whether or not Europeans are Africans, we would have to first examine the cultural context and then compare it and make analysis, which we will do. But we want to make sure in this presentation that we understand our differences more than our similarities.
Absolutely.
So do you have a slide on biological versus the social construct of race?
No, I just had it, I just had a little slide on the social concepts of race. And you kind of touched on that, Sister Nyah, when you said that when they came up with race, they used phenotype, right? And what we mean by phenotype, we mean by your observable properties of an organism, right? That are produced by the interaction of the genotype and the environment. So she talked about phenotype. So race was initially predicated on phenotype, and then religion, right? And I pulled out a verse from the Bible, Numbers chapter 1, verse 18, when it said that, I think in this statement, they said that people were declared by their pedigrees, right? So in religion, the pedigree of your father, right? That's religion. And then remember, Sister Nyah, they had like the 1-drop rule. I don't know if you touched on that, the 1-drop rule. Okay. So remember, it was the 1-drop rule. So any person with even one ancestor of sub-Saharan African ancestry, if they're considered Black, the 1-drop rule. And in the United States, the 1-drop rule, which is also known as hypodescendant, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, hypodescendant, it dates back to 1662 Virginia law on the treatment of mixed race individuals. Okay, so you had the 1-drop rule. So that's the only slide that I had up. Mentioning like the social concepts of race. But could you explain to the people what you mean by like race being a biological construct?
Okay, so we went over, and it's very important that we stay on task. We went over what speciation means and what a genus is. So when we're looking at the biological aspects of race, one of the things that we're looking at is the level of variance between one population versus another population. So basically, scientists developed a mathematical equation called a FST score, which is a fixed index score. And basically it lets us know how much variance exists between populations. So the purpose of this meeting, when I talk about populations, I'm looking at an African as a population, although we know that Africans have a lot of different tribes. I'm looking at Europeans as a population. I'm looking at Asians as a population, Native Americans as a population, and then indigenous people of Alaska as another population. So when scientists are evaluating whether or not these different populations have undergone speciation, they're looking at a mechanism called the FST score, and also they're looking at the level of variance or the differences in these populations. When they look at the differences in all these populations, they find that the FST score is less than 12 to 15%, which means that we haven't been separated long enough in history to be considered a separate species. So when scientists says the biological aspects of race is not meaningful, what they're saying is that we're basically 98.9% the same. Because, right. So that's the biological aspects of race. When they talk about the biological aspects, they're not talking about haplogroups, or they're not talking about lineages per se. They're talking about chromosomes. All of us have 23. We get 23 chromosomes from our mom, 23 chromosomes from our dad. They're talking about the genetic makeup of all humans. They're talking about what makes us human. So it's very important when we're talking about biology, we're not just talking about lineages. Lineages are important because it gives us context, but for the most part, we're talking about our chromosome makeup, our DNA, our RNA, and all those things. So that's kind of the difference between biological race versus the social aspect of race, which has more to do with populations and things to that matter. So you want to explain the population and the social aspects of race and how that works out?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about going into haplogroups because you mentioned the time, but we didn't like kind of define what haplogroup is and why you defined it. I was going to look for a map, like to put on so people can understand what we mean by haplogroups and the different type of haplogroups that exist.
Okay, so Dr. Maat, I have a question. While you're still looking for that, you might need to pull it up. The question I have for you, my sister, is that Minister Inky talks about the rhesus monkey. I want to know, what type of relationship does the rhesus monkey have with the European? Because all of this, again, we're going to get into where the European actually comes from. So I don't want y'all to drop that ball on that. I want y'all to let the world know, where do we come from? So talk to us about the rhesus monkey relationship to the European, and if that have any correlation at all.
Sister Nyah starts laughing. He talks about, so tell me what his position is, Brother Sinetta, because I've never heard of him talk like
you never seen a debate between him and Brother Natural Tahuti?
No. So you got to tell me. You got to explain. I don't know what
I don't want to misquote him, but he's in the chat room. Minister Inky, under the sound of my voice, brother, you can call in right now and you can make your claim, you can make your statement, and let the sisters hear what it is you're saying, because I don't want to misrepresent what you're saying.
Absolutely, and I don't want to answer a question, and I fully understand, what it is. I don't know what his claim is. So
okay.
Yeah, it's when you talk about the rhesus monkey, basically most of the arguments are surrounded around the Rh negative blood types.
There you go. Here you go. He calling in. I got y'all.
Okay.
Cool.
Hey, Dr. Maat, another thing is, Dr. Inky has now received his doctorate degree. So the brother, he got his doctorate. So Dr. Inky, I got Dr. Maat on the phone here. On the stream. And Sister Nyah, and of course, Empress Sekhmet. So I don't want to misquote you, my brother. I would rather let you state your facts as far as the European and the rhesus monkey.
Now, hold up. Before we go there, you just said my brother received his PhD. Congratulations. I want to know, is your dissertation can I find it in ProQuest, brother?
No, it's not in ProQuest. It's a naturopathic school. So their stuff is not in ProQuest, but it's registered with the state of Michigan. But I told Uncle last night I might let people, read it. I just didn't want it up. You know how this shit get.
Hold up. But you said a PhD.
No.
What's the name of the school again, brother Inky?
Yes.
I said, what's the name of the school again?
I have a doctorate of naturopathy. I'm not telling the school online. I don't want the conscious, they be calling my school, trolling my school. And, But we can talk offline on that.
Okay, Minister Inky, do you have a question?
Yes. So in regards to my position, right? My position, when you in an argument, when you're in a debate, everything you say gets accredited to you, even when you're referencing other people, because they may be hearing it from or through you for the first time. So my point in the initial conversations we had years back was that all throughout elementary and grade school in general, we have heard that you have the primates coming out of the primates or the great apes, whatever the case may be. You have the Neanderthal, caveman, etc., etc. Then you have African, then you have European. I just didn't agree with that story because it doesn't match up with the rest of how life began. And it doesn't match up with cell biology when we look at what's still going on the planet currently today. So what I was saying, how that got tagged to me was, I was saying that I do not ascribe to coming from a line of monkeys. Now, if you want to push that on the Europeans because they put that on themselves. So when we ask them where they come from, they do the caveman, Neanderthal, great ape, then they do the DNA testing and say, well, Europeans still have the lingering Neanderthal DNA, but they don't find it in Africa at all. Now there's some stuff out there saying they're finding traces, etc., etc. So my thing is that the creation for humans is no different than it was for the rest of the species on this planet, and that you have a couple of originals, and then from those original species, you have the mixing of those originals, and then you get the rest of the species. But to quote me proper for my minister, Dr. Inky, Minister Inky, the guy you got, mine is simple. This is my premise, right? This is a rich, so everybody can quote me on this, right? Life is the particle that emerges from the wave, which is the environment. And so we see that beyond a shadow of a doubt, even in cell cultures today, inside bodies, in vivo or in vitro. The environment of a cell acts on the membrane, and the membrane then determines all of the enzymes, structures, the microtubule system, etc., that must be built within that cell.
Sonetta, I feel like that Dr. Inky is being long-winded right now. He's asking a very long question. He has to
ask the question, brother. Just ask the question.
I mean, you're basically
I was giving you my theory on where they came from.
Now you got to make the question short because you got to be fair so we can be able to address it. You got to clarify because you're all over the place right now. So could you please clarify so we can get clarity?
I got you. I'm just explaining that. Okay, so my theory is this: there were multiple types of humans created in different locations on this planet, in the same way you have fish or birds.
Okay, thank you. So Dr. Maat, do you want to address that first?
Yeah, so he's basically, it sounds like to me, Sister Nyah, that he basically subscribes to the old regional continuity theory. And they beat that up. I mean, with fossil.
Wait.
No, hold on, Inky.
No, I'm just saying, it seems like he's saying that there were different populations of humans and that we emerged from these humans, right? Brother Inky, is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that the planet was originally all cells. So what you find is particular patterns emerge from the archaeological record at the same time. So, like, for instance, like the Cambrian event, which we were talking about last night, when you find the earliest fish, in part or in whole, you find a couple of different original types. And then from those types, you find mixing, genetic material sharing, and then years later, you get some new species, years later, you get some new species, etc., which began to be enveloped under the theory of evolution. But the missing pieces was, where was the genetic information coming to support the new arrangements and variations of cellular function?
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Just here recently.
All right, Inky. Now, what I need you to do is ask a quick question and hang up so they can go in.
Okay. All right. So, my question is, do you feel that we should spend more time focused on the origin of the European per se, or should we spend more time focused on the origin of the melanated species or black man and black woman?
All right, thanks, Inky. Listen to it on the joint.
Well, I think first of all, we just need to clarify to the audience that Dr. Inky didn't ask a question regarding the rhesus monkey, and that was the original question. So it's very important that we understand that first of all. So, what do you think, Dr. Maat? Do you think?
So first of all, he didn't answer the question. I mean, he didn't ask the question regarding the rhesus monkey and the Europeans' connection to the rhesus monkey. He didn't ask that question, and then he started talking about fish and cells, and we're talking about human beings, right? We're talking about human beings. And I was trying to understand his position, and it sounded to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sister Nyah, it sounded like he believes that the world was populated with different populations, right, of humans, and then from there that we, us Africans, Europeans, Asians, we all descended from these various populations. I thought that's what he was. I thought that was his contention. Like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that is what he was trying to say. Or did I miss?
I think he was basically saying how organisms work is that they just populate on different aspects of the world, and then people pop up in Asia and Africa, and so it's this polygenesis type of argument. But
okay, so that's what he subscribes to. So would you say that the regional continuity theory is sort of like the poly, is it in line with the poly?
I have to, that's why when you was talking about it today, I was like, oh, okay, I got to research it a little more. I'm not familiar.
It sounds like to me that it is polygenesis, because I'm sharing my screen right now. I don't know if you can see it, but it says that it suggests that Homo sapiens arose from earlier archaic populations in many places throughout the whole world. And it says over time, the archaic populations in these different places gave, birth to us, like in different places. So it sounds like a polygenesis sort of theory, but this theory has been beat up with DNA and fossil evidence. You get what I'm saying? Like, because with fossil evidence and DNA, they were able to kind of pinpoint a point of origin. You get what I'm saying? Versus saying that, people came from these multiple places of origin, that they were able to, with DNA and fossil evidence, pinpoint an actual location for our particular species. So it sounds like to me that regional continuity theory is more of a polygenesis theory, but that theory got beat up, with DNA and fossils. So that's what it sounds like to me, Sister Nyah. So
right, yeah.
It sounds like that's what he was trying to suggest, but that theory has been proved to be wrong.
Okay, yeah. I mean, he kind of went all over the place. I think that it sounds like he takes more of a metaphysical approach to science, which can be valuable in certain environments. But for this presentation, we need greater specification. And so I'm just going to share my screen because I want to get into the meat and potatoes. I think we spent a lot of time on the introduction. So this is kind of the taxonomy family rank system, just to kind of let you guys know, when you look at this little yellow spot, the hominin, you have two distinct categories. You have the Homo and you have the Pan. Our species is the Homo. So under Homo, you notice that there's no other species under that, because we are the last surviving human type. So even if there were human types in the beginning, we're definitely the last surviving human types, and Pan is kind of our cousin, but we're here. So just to answer Minister Inky's I guess, question or whatever that was, we are only one species. There's no multiple. There's no multiple continental theories that we can prove at this particular point. I do suggest that he continues the research in that area, because I know that there's a lot of new information that's coming out. But for the most part, if you look at the hominin right here, you see that Homo, which is our genus, that's the last surviving human type. Okay, the human type. So that's our genome. So that's why we started off this conversation. We wanted you guys to know that we're not debating whether or not life started in Africa, because all of the research points to this fact, which is that life started in Africa. And what happened was humans migrated from out of Africa around 35 to 40,000 years ago, and then they went into Asia. And so when they went into Asia, they began to mutate. So when we look at the polygenic tree, do you have the haplogroups for the females up, Dr. Maat? Did you ever
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, and I can share that, so you can go.
So when you look at, we're going to just basically look at the mitochondrial DNA, because that kind of tells a story about how humans left Africa. You see, you have these different groups of people. You have the L1, L0, L3, L2. And if you look in the middle of Africa, you'll see that L3 mutated either in Africa or in Asia, this green part.
Right.
It went up in Southeast Asia, and then some of them went north. So you can see that when we're talking about Europeans, we're talking about a population of people. They're over here in the left-hand corner. You see 39 to 51,000 years ago.
Right.
So you see them you see their lineages kind of changing. You see them going from N to I to W to X to T to U to UKVR. And the reason why you have those differences is because the environmental stressors.
Absolutely.
So Europe was very brutal for Africans. All these mitochondrial DNA migrations, you see L3. L3 goes up in the top part of Africa into Europe, and you see L3 mutates into either R or IWX. The reason that she mutates is because of this environment. She could not, or whoever the group, they could not withstand the environment. Okay, Dr. Maat, you want to build on that?
Yeah, I was just getting ready to say that I wanted to look up a definition while you were talking, but I was sharing my screen. I wanted to define what we mean by mutation.
Okay.
Because a lot of people, I've heard different bills with the brothers, and they think as soon as you say mutation, they automatically think because you are a mutation that you're now degenerate.
Right.
And I've heard a lot of brothers say, if they left out and they mutated, it meant that they changed, and they had to change. They had to adapt to their environment. Okay, so the environment caused them to change genetically, and then when they changed their genotype or altered their genotype, and in altering their genotype, it altered their phenotype. Right. All of this was due to the environment. But I think that when we say mutate, a lot of people, I don't think that they quite understand what like mutation means or adaptation. So I was looking for definitions on my phone, but I wanted to kind of do a little slide real fast.
All right, I found one for you. You want me to get it for you? I found a definition for you.
Okay, so go ahead and share your
okay.
Screen.
So can you see my screen?
Let me exit out of mine. Yes.
Okay.
That's what I need, sis. So what is a gene mutation and how do mutations occur? Absolutely. Let's go, sis.
Okay, so a gene mutation is a permanent alteration in the DNA sequence that makes up a gene, such that the sequence differs from what is found in most people. So a gene mutation is a permanent alteration in the DNA sequence that makes up a gene, such that the sequence differs from what is found in most people. Mutations range in size. They can affect anywhere from a single DNA building block base pair to a large segment of chromosomes that includes multiple genes. Gene mutations can be classified in two major ways. Hereditary mutations are inherited from a parent and are present throughout a person's life in virtually every cell in the body. These mutations are also called germline mutations because they are present in the parent's egg or sperm cells, which are also called germ cells. When an egg and a sperm cell unite, the resulting fertilized egg cell receives DNA from both parents. If this DNA has a mutation, the child that grows from that fertilized egg will have the mutation in each of his or her cells. So acquired or somatic mutations occurred at some time during a person's life and are present only in certain cells, not in every cell in the body. These changes can be caused by environmental factors such as ultraviolet radiation from the sun, or can occur if an error is made as DNA copies itself during cell division. Acquired mutations in somatic cells, cells other than the sperm and egg cells, cannot be passed to the next generation. Genetic changes that are described as Devo new mutations can be either hereditary or somatic. In some causes, the mutation occurs in a person's eggs or cell, but is not present in all the cell's body. Is that enough, or do I need to keep going?
No, sis. I mean, I think that you drove home the point that when you talk about, you know, genetic mutation, that we're talking about a change in the nucleotide sequence, right, of a gene or a chromosome. That's what we're talking about, a change in the nucleotide sequence of a gene or a chromosome, right? That's what we're talking about, simply a change. But I think that a lot of people, when we say a mutation or a mutant, we think that because the person is a mutant or because there was a change in the genetics or the gene or the chromosome, that now they're degenerate. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
Yes. So Dr. Maat and Sister Nyah. So the bottom line is that we're saying that the European is nothing but a light-skinned African.
Right. Dr. Maat, put your screen back in there with the.
He comes right up out of our genetic makeup. This is what y'all teaching. This is what y'all saying.
So if you look at the Sanetta, when she put up the map, so what you'll see the Africans in red, and you'll see the Europeans in yellow. Now, once the African leaves Africa, right?
Come on, sis.
Once the African leaves Africa, something happens. They change. They make a change. They're no longer African.
Facts.
They're yellow.
Sanetta, hit the bombshell. Hit the bombshell. Once they left out of Africa, she said something happens. A change occurred. And because a change occurred, they are no longer African. Where's the bomb? Where's the bomb effect? That's what we're teaching. We do not teach that the European is an African.
Right. We do not teach that. We teach that the European is the European. He's not an African. And then you even have the DNA evidence.
All right. Now hold on.
Okay.
Same thing where I chastised my brother Captain Tazoriak when he said that there were two nations in the womb created by the same father, right? Now, if this European comes up out of the genetic makeup of the African, right? That means he got the blood, he got the DNA, he got all of this stuff, right? So now, why is he no longer African if he was made up from the African? He comes right up out of that gene pool.
Mm-hmm. And that's why Brother Wujaru and Brother Ankh last night, they said that he is fundamentally African, or essentially ultimately African. They say that because Africa is the source of the source of, or the origin of human life, right? But Sister Nyah and I we stand on this. Once they migrated out of Africa and they mutated and they changed, right? Phenotypes changed, genes were changed, right? Phenotype, genes changed. They began to practice different culture. They are no longer African. When you say that Europeans are African or European is an African, when you say are and is, these are verbs, present tense verbs. So to say that a European is an African or Europeans are, you're saying present day, present tense. No, a change of...
Hit the bomb, sir. Hit the bomb.
So now, you're saying present tense, are, is, present tense verbs. No, they once, we can say that they are mutations. They are they are mutants. So
right.
Yeah, and that's the bottom line.
So now let me ask you. I know you both subscribe to the terms of evolution, Why do you think it's so hard for our people to understand evolution? Because we still fight in the same argument 5, 6 years ago. Why is it so hard? Is it the lack of study that our people don't want to take the time out to really do the research themselves? They just want to hear say. They just want to go with certain people say instead of them doing the research. Why do you think it's still hard for them to accept the that evolution is real?
And I just want to square this. I'm sorry, is that Sister Sekhmet wanted to say something? You wanted to say something, Queen?
Yes, I wanted to quickly interject what y'all was just expounding upon, because we have people asking the question, and I just wanted to throw it in there before it got missed. Mm-hmm. So when you say that when they've migrated or moved from out of Africa, mm-hmm. They mutated, they've changed. So what does that mean for us?
What does that mean for us?
What does that mean for us? So the question is, so now is the Black American the same as the African, the continental African? Or have we also mutated in such a way?
Good question. Good mm-hmm. question, Sekhmet. I like that.
That's a great question. And I think that people get confused. And I think when we look at migration, we're talking about 3 specific events. The first migration, the second migration, and the third migration. The third migration out of Africa involves African Americans, the group that we call African Americans. So just because we migrated out of Africa, it doesn't mean that we are not African, because our migration, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but our migration has been relatively recent. Most African Americans, the 45 million of us who live in America today, just left Africa between the 15th and the 17th century. Okay, so we are recent migrants to America. The first migrants went into Asia. The second migrants went into the area like the Arabian Peninsula, and they went in there, and then they interbred with the Denisovans. So African Americans,
I'm quite sure you can still see the change of us over here, the quote unquote African Americans and the continental Africans. So I know you see a change taking place between us and them. When you look at our features, our hands, our feet, the way we dance, the way we move, the way we talk, the way.
Well, I would expound that question on a different level in regards to what the sisters had said. Exactly, the climate change, what we ate changed. The all these different things that changed in us. Could that be a mutation as well? Could we have changed on that level to be considered now different than before?
No, we haven't. At this point, we haven't been out of Africa long enough to have made any changes. The majority of African Americans, 85%, are between 70 to 80% West African. So we haven't changed. Now, if we look at South Americans and we go to South American and a lot of these South American countries, they have been away from Africa a little longer, and they had a lot of admixture. So they have made a lot of changes in their DNA, because at least 30% of them are only African, whereas when they first went over there, they were like 80% African. So we haven't admixed, and the reason that we haven't admixed as much is because the Portuguese had a different system than the Europeans. Europeans segregated us from them. They bred us. There was instances of rape, but it wasn't like the Portuguese. The Portuguese went over there and just started marrying those Native Americans and started mixing with Africans in South America. The Europeans in America didn't do that. So at this point, there hasn't been enough time where we are that different from Africans. For instance, I'm 85% West African. I did my DNA test and I'm brown skinned, but we haven't changed enough. What has happened is that the results of slavery has made some epigenetic changes to our overall condition here. Like you see high levels of type 2 diabetes, for instance. Like they don't have a problem with type 2 diabetes in Africa, but we developed that because of our time here. You see high instances of high blood pressure among us. We've developed that because we're here. Africans don't have these problems. So you see a lot of health disparity as a result of being here, but we haven't gotten to the point where we can say that we've changed and we've had mutations per se, but we see changes in our health. And
absolutely.
Dr. Nyah.
Yeah.
Hell of a good answer.
Thank you.
No, but she's right. We haven't been the mutations, and Sister Nyah, you can correct me if I'm wrong. That takes thousands of years, and I believe that Brother Wujau said that last night. That when they change and things mutate, sometimes that can take thousands and thousands of years for that to occur. And I believe that the brother said that last night. And I just want to show the listening. I want to show the audience my DNA results. Go get your DNA tested. I went to African Ancestry, and I had them trace my mitochondrial DNA. Well, that's all they could trace because I'm a female. I have XX. I don't have a Y chromosome. And so I went to African Ancestry, and I had Dr. Rick Kittles, his organization. They trace my mitochondrial DNA, and this is my mitochondrial DNA sequence. And down, look at this. It says it is with great pleasure. And I blanked out, of course, my information, my address and stuff like that. But it says it is with great pleasure that I report your matrix clan analysis. And it says we have determined that you share maternal genetic ancestry with the Bamileke people in Cameroon. Okay, so this is my actual mtDNA sequence down here. And it says that my similarity score with these people is 100%, meaning that they are 100% confident in my result. Okay, that I share DNA with the people, the Bamileke people of Cameroon. So as Sister Nyah said, this is just supporting what you just said, Sister Nyah, that we haven't been away. We're not that far removed to be something else. You get what I'm saying? Not so
hey, let me say this real quick.
What?
The answer this dude that's in the chat room, no, not all DNAs are fake. You seen yesterday where the brother had 2 DNA tests from different places and different companies, and they both came back saying the same thing. So not all DNA tests are fake. We got to stop saying that. And another thing is Garfield had 5 DNA tests. You know what I'm saying? Garfield had 5 DNA tests, and I guess he said they all came back saying the same thing. So you know what? We say that when we don't really want to let the people know that I'm not no damn Hebrew or I'm not no more. So we would come up with stuff like, oh, the DNA is fake. But I guarantee you, if you was in jail for a rape charge and you had a DNA that could only get your ass out of it, you will run to a DNA then. That's when you'll beg for a DNA. So stop the games. And let me bring on the brother that's on the phone right now before he busts and go crazy. His name is, and let me say this.
The brothers had their night last night, son. The brothers had their night. They let the sisters live. The brothers had their night.
Hold on, sister. He just want to ask a question. He ain't coming on to give a lecture or no speech. But
okay.
What I'm gonna say is, my brother Reggie never claimed that he was a doctor. I'm the one that gave him that title. Reggie never called himself doctor. If you listen to him, he always say, I'm Brother Reggie. So that's to clear it up inside of there too. I'm the one that calls him doctor. You see? So don't scorn my brother Reggie for me calling him doctor. All right. Without any further ado, I bring to you Dr. Reggie. What's up, Dr. Reg? Dr. Reggie, you on the air? Dr. Reggie, do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now.
Okay, you on the air, my brother.
Okay, so the 2 scholars are doing an incredible job. They happen to be sisters, but their scholarship is definitely preceding them. So I think part of what I was looking for was some work on admixture and human sequencing of the genome. I think that when people the problem is when people talk about like the rhesus monkey, well, there is evolutionary admixture, evolutionary biology from sex. The rhesus you'll find the rhesus in probably the last common ancestor, which would probably be Heidelbergensis, and there you will find the rhesus. But when the Neanderthal and the Heidelbergensis, the Neanderthal and what would become the Homo sapiens sapiens separated, then you have the differences. So what is some of your work or your thinking on the genome sequencing and any analysis of human sequencing and admixture that you can bring to the table? Because the Neanderthal his genome is not in Africa, except for when the Neanderthal came into Africa. Again, so Neanderthal is a separate population of humans, and that's part of the definition of admixture. So, do you have any? Because I think that is. I think this is a big problem when you look at the Neanderthal, the Denisovan, the Heidelbergensis, and the Homo sapiens sapiens. Then those are the keys to creating the other type of and the admixture, the phenotypical differences between the African on the continent and then the Asian, which would probably come first, and then those other populations. So my question is, what is your work, or what can you bring to bear on genome sequencing and admixture?
Okay, Dr. Reg, I'm gonna hang up, all right, while they're talking.
Sure.
All right. Who want to take on that first?
I'll take on it. I mean, it's an excellent question, because in the community, a lot of times we often we're debating whether
you're still sharing your screen, Dr. Nyah.
Yeah. I'm about to go to something I want you guys to see.
Okay.
So if you kind of take a look at my screen, you'll see this Homo clad, all the different species. And here you see, sorry, let me go back to that screen. I need to stop clicking. So when we go to my screen, you see Homo neanderthalis. So he's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's right here at the top, and he's Homo neanderthalis. So at the bottom, you see us. You see Homo sapiens sapiens. So all of these different types of humans, right, belong to the Homo clade. So if you remember my last slide when I showed you that Homo is actually our genus and our species is Homo sapiens. But for the sake of this question, I want you guys to pay attention to Homo neanderthalis, because that's the question Reggie has. So basically, one of the things that we have to understand about migration is that when the first migration happened, a lot of these Homo clades, and I know this is going to be hard for Christians to swallow, but there were already human types in Europe and in Asia. So I know that's hard for you to believe, because the Bible teaches you that God made all of us at once, but it's not the truth. There's all these different species who went in and out of Africa. So when Homo sapiens sapiens, just a group of Homo sapiens sapiens, if you remember that L3 marker, a group of Homo sapiens sapiens left Africa and went into Arabia, and in Arabia they made it with a different human. It was called the Denisovan. I don't have them here, but you can just see that they made it with a different type of human. So Homo sapiens leaves Africa, goes into Arabia, and mates with a different type of species. So everyone outside of Africa who are considered non-African, they're going to have these genetic markers that show that they went outside of Africa and then made it with different types of Africans. Now in Africa, we made it with other types of Africans, but we did it inside the continent, and they can see these differences by looking at microevolution. So what Reggie is saying is, like, the difference between an African and a European is really this Desonovan, because this Desonovan was in Arabia for a long time. And in Arabia, they developed certain mutations and certain adaptations. One of those adaptations was skin. So when they were in the caves in Arabia and in Asia, it was extremely cold. So in order for them to survive that environment, they were able to do so because they had already made it with this Desonovan. So they have very thick skin because they are able to kind of withstand colder environments. Africans don't have these type of mutations. For instance, if we take the mutation SLA, what is it, Dr. Maat? It's SLC.
Yeah, I'm bringing it up right now, sis. I actually have it, an article right here if you want to go into that.
Okay, so when you take the gene SLC24A5, what you see is that gene evolved in Europe, not in Africa. We have a similar gene. It's called the OAC gene, but that gene is not the same as SLC485. They developed a mutation in Europe because if they didn't develop that mutation, they likely would have died. So it helped them to withstand the very, very cold environment of Europe. And part of that survival process was because they made it with different type of humans that had been out of Africa for a long time, and they too had developed mutations. So they needed a different type of protection. We have dark skin because we in Africa, in the sun, by the beach, chilling. It's not cold. You know, the weather changes frequently, but for the most part, it's going to be sunny. It's going to be, you know, we have our dark skin. We're close to the equator. When they move out of Africa, they mate with the Desonovan, they mate with the Neanderthal, and from this, they develop different type of mutations. One of them is SLCA45. They have the Sarah gene, and they have a host of other genes that they developed as a result of their time in Europe. So yes, Reggie, the difference between Africans and non-Africans is the interbreeding with the Desonovan first in Arabia, and then with the Neanderthal once they leave Asia into Europe.
Absolutely. Yes, I want to share my screen really fast. So let's share my screen. All right, so you started talking about the SLC24A5 gene. I'm sorry, Sinetta, did you want to say something?
No, I think it. No.
All right, so it says right here. All right, SmithsonianMag.com. Okay, here's how Europeans quickly evolved. And they say quickly, but anyway, here's how Europeans quickly evolved lighter skin. It says darker skinned people lived in Europe until fairly recently. In fact, they did a reconstruction of the first European. It was done by a forensic scientist, Richard Nyah. He reconstructed the face based on skull fragments from 35,000 years ago and came up with this this is a reconstructed face of the actual first European, okay? And you see that this, you know, based on phenotype, it looks like an African. But anyway, it says that as Europeans divided and it says, well, here we go. I don't even want to get in there. It says they carry genes for light skin with them, but even Europeans haven't been white for very long. New analysis of ancient European genes showed that other traits we associate with modern Europeans, such as tallness and the ability to digest milk, and also relatively recent additions to the continent's genetic profile. It says new data presented at the annual meeting of the American Association of Physical Anthropologists comes from the genomes of 83 people found in archaeological sites across Europe, reports Ann Gibbons for Science. For years, researchers assumed that skin lightness humans migrated from Africa and the Middle East into Europe about 40,000 years ago. A sun lower in the sky and shorter day's length would have favored skin that more easily synthesize vitamin D. And I know that I think the brothers touched on vitamin D last night. I'm not sure, but easily synthesize vitamin D. But researchers are now learning that other factors must have been at play. For example, earlier this year, the genome sequencing of a hunter-gatherer who lived in what is now Spain helped build the case that Europe was home to blue-eyed, dark-skinned people. Oh, wait a minute. Did you hear that, Sister Nyah? Because a lot of people think that blue eyes are just endemic to European people, but they are blue-eyed, dark-skinned people. But anyway, we can build on that at another time. Blue-eyed, but dark-skinned people. This man, however, lived just 7,000 years ago. The researchers write that their analysis suggests that light skin was not yet widespread and ubiquitous in Europe at the time. Earlier work done with the genes of 83 people in the new study, supported by linguistic evidence, also shows that populations in Europe about 8,000 years ago would have been mixed and diverse. There go that admixture. Says the new study adds to this growing pile of evidence. Gibbons reports that researchers found that Europeans probably couldn't have digested milk until about 4,300 years ago, and the story of skin pigmentation is complex. She writes, the new data confirm that about 8,500 years ago, early hunter-gatherer in Spain, Luxembourg, and Hungary also had darker skin. They lack versions of two genes, which Sister Nyah talked about, the SLC24A5 and the SLC45A2, that led to depigmentation and therefore pale skin in Europeans today. Okay, but it says, but in the far north, where low light levels would favor pale skin, the team found a different picture in hunter-gatherers. 7 people from the 7,700-year Matala archaeological site in southern Sweden had both light-skinned gene variants, SLC24A5 and SLC45A2. They also had a third gene, HERC2 / OCA2, which causes blue eyes, right? Blue eyes, and may also contribute to light skin and blonde hair. Thus, ancient hunter-gatherers of the far north were already pale and blue-eyed, but those of Central and Southern Europe had darker skin. All right. So basically, this pale skin that she's talking about, this is something that happened about 8,500 years ago. And this is due to two genes, the SLC24A5 and the SLC45A2 gene. Okay. So I just wanted to share this little article with the fam, Sister Nyah. And there are plenty of articles. Like all you have to do is just Google, white skin, and a bunch of articles will populate on Google. Okay. For further reading.
Yeah. So that's a good point. So you can see like how we're building the argument and showing you using the evidence that as Africans moved out of Africa into Europe, they went through a traumatic experience.
Absolutely.
And if you're really interested on how traumatic that experience was, you can look up vitamin D deficiency and some of the symptoms of that. Dr. Maat, could you look that up for me? If you look at vitamin D deficiency, you'll see that deficiency causes a lot of that in war causes a lot of other psychological problems, such as depression. I know that there's a gene where scientists have said that Europeans have a gene that makes them more susceptible to violence and depression. So there's a lot of consequences to not having vitamin D deficiency. And you gotta know that in Africa, we didn't have vitamin D deficiency. This is one of the reasons why we know that Europeans aren't Africans, because in Europe, the African is at a disadvantage. The African cannot survive this climate because of the environmental factors that push natural selection and evolution. Now, these dark-skinned people, they had dark skin, but the reason they had dark skin is because in Asia, they had a high vitamin D diet. So in Asia, you see them with this darker skin because of their diet. But once you go into Europe, the climate is different. The food source is different. And so that's why they said they went through a drastic change. change, and they underwent certain mutations. They have about 3 or 4 of them that are very distinct in Europe that aren't present in African. So when we're concluding about who's African and who's not, it's important that we're also looking at genetics, mutations, migrations, natural selection, and evolution as our guide to making these decisions. We can't say just because someone went from Africa to Asia to Europe and then neglect all those environmental factors and evolutionary factors that make them unique traits and help with their overall survival. So
absolutely, sis. And that's why, remember earlier today offline, you and I were building on populations. We were saying that, you know, Europeans, that we're the same species, but there are different populations of the species, right? And by population, we mean a group of organisms of one species that interbreed and live in the same place at the same time. So, you know, so Europeans and us Africans, we're the same species. We're all Homo sapiens sapien, but they are a different population of sapien. I mean, sorry, a different population of Homo sapiens sapien. And let me share this, Sister Nyah.
That was a good transition.
Absolutely, sis. Absolutely, my sister. So population, here we go. So in genetics, population, a group of organisms of one species that interbreed and live in the same place at the same time, right? Taxonomy, you know, because, okay, there's several definitions of a population. In genetics, we say a group of organisms of one species that interbreed and live in the same place at the same time, right? Taxonomy would say a low-level taxonomic rank. Statistics, we say that a set of individuals, objects, or data where statistical sample can be drawn, all right? So population, a population refers to a group of organisms of a species that interbreed and live in the same place at the same time. They are capable of interbreeding and reproduction. All right. And it says that relevant terms in the study of population include population biology, population ecology, population size, population bottleneck, population decline, and etc. Population biology refers to the biological study of animal populations. And it says it's primarily concerned with the growth and regulations of populations. So anyway, we would say that, yes, Europeans and Africans, that we are the same species, but within the species, you have various populations. And Sister Nyah, please tell the people, what is populations? Can you define population genetics? Because they have a whole field dedicated to population genetics. So yes, we are the same species, just a different population within that species.
Right. And that's a good point. And that's kind of like our overall premise and why we wanted to do this show, because, you know, our population is African. Europeans have their own population. Asians have their populations. So you can't be African and a European. You can't be both. So when we're looking at these populations of Europeans, we're not saying that they are different. They are a different species than us. We're just saying that they're a different population. So one of the big things that people are studying now is population genetics. And basically population genetics is basically the study of variation among human populations. If you know what a human population, go ahead and put it in, you know, the 4 major human populations, go ahead and put it in the chat box right now so we can make sure that you guys are listening. You can just drop that in the chat box. Like, what are the 4 major human populations that we are referring to today? And let's see if y'all got it.
Let me go to the chat room and see if they know, Sister Nyah.
Got it, because that's important that they keep up once we transition. So what's the 4 major populations we're talking about?
I'm waiting for them to type it in the chat now. Somebody.
Labels. Patasa labels. Okay. Okay. There's only 2 races. We not paying attention. Monica. Okay. Neanderthal died 400 years. Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Okay. So we got the Bible. Okay. I don't know anything either. Kaba says she don't know anything. Europeans, there we go. African, Europeans, Mongoloid. There you go. I see you, Perez.
I see him. I see him. I see the
face. Okay.
There you go. So yeah, so population genetics study these different populations, and they look at disease among the population. They look at all sorts of things. They look at genetics, they look at history, they look at culture, language. So they look at various things in the population and they try to find out either the similarities or the differences. So they're trying to figure out specifically what's different among these populations. And, you know, the conclusion is that most of these populations are basically the same. The variance and the differences between Europeans, Asians, and Africans are basically environmental, and therefore in conclusion we have to know that we are the same species and not different species, as Dr. Inky had tried to attempt to educate us on. So population genetics studies differences in human populations. So when we're looking at human populations, this kind of brings us into the discussion of race kind of again, because in America, the idea of race is where we learn about human diversity. And it was a very racist thing to learn that our species somehow is less than their species. So it's very important that we know that in population genetics, we're not looking at race from a biological perspective, but we're looking at it from a population perspective. We're looking at their environment, how that environment shaped their genetics, how their history and their migration patterns make them unique. So the African is an African because the Africa.
Come on,
not because all Homo sapiens sapiens originated in Africa. The African is the African because of the history of that population. The European, the Asian. So we have to be sure that we're properly putting things in perspective, because this is going to allow us to understand, like Sister Sekhmet said, we can't do nothing about it if we don't understand who we are and how we should be moving as a group.
That's right, sister. That's right. And I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sister Sekhmet.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely want to expound on that. I do have some questions in regard, and I think that you're leading into the area where I wanted to have some questions, where a lot of our people are in contention, especially when we talk about this conscious community, right? Because this is what we want to affect. We want to affect us with knowledge so we can better understand us and how to defeat them. So we have this contention, all these different sects in our community. People are saying that we're not from Africa. People are saying that we're not all that we're, some of us are indigenous, that all blacks that are in America did not come from Africa, and things of that nature. And I think that that's where the connection to the European and the want to disconnect in a way that we make up these stories, or we were made in a lab. They made Europeans in a lab. We have all these different stories that are made up because we want to disconnect ourselves without having the full and complete information on how to separate the difference when not just race. And I believe that that's where most of the contention comes in, is when we begin to mix race with genetics and not have a clear understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So my question now is, and this is the people's question, is now we're talking about blacks in America and how a lot of our people are not considering themselves African.
Mm-hmm.
They're not considering themselves descendants of African, and we have this indigenous wave that's happening right now. And
tell them to take that's just a segment. Tell them to take a DNA test. The people that's from Africa, tell them to take a DNA test.
But also, that's the one thing I wanted you to bring out, so you can touch on the whole indigenous versus being from Africa or indigenous to the Americas. Also, I definitely wanted to ask you sisters to touch on the psychological effects of the blacks in America today, and can the psychological trauma change us in a way, or change us in a genetic way. For an example, when you see a killer whale in captivity, right? The dorsal fin curves when in captivity, but if you see a killer whale that is free, the dorsal fin is straight. There is a physical change when captivity is presented into that animal's dynamics. There's a physical change. Can you equate a physical change to our psychological trauma of being in captivity?
Mm-hmm. Wow, you bringing the heat, boy. You're bringing the heat in the building. Boy. Okay.
Yeah. Take that, Nyah, because I want to look for something. I want to look for something, and I'm looking at this book right now, Civilization of Barbarism. But answer her question, because I want to come back. I want to add to that.
Okay.
One more thing real quick is that when you answer that question, I want to begin to open up the phone lines so we don't be here all day. People want to call in. Let's answer the phone lines. I think y'all killed it. Let's take about 10 callers and we're going to call it a night, wrap it up. I know y'all got lady duties to attend to. And let's get it in. So go ahead, Sister Nyah.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, the controversy in the conscious community regarding our indigenous status. I think that part of the consequence and part of being African American is coming face to face with the reality that we have been psychologically conditioned to think a certain way. Africans generally don't think in terms of race and differences. We are tribal, and so we're looking at proximity, language, culture, food, politics. We're not necessarily looking at color because color, we're all black or brown or light skinned. So as Black people living in America today, it's a discussion that we're going to eventually have to have, whether or not we want to be called Black people or whether or not we want to be called African. Because I think most of the contention around whether or not we're African has to do with the sovereignty movement in the Moorish temple science, or the Moorish science temple. I think that Black people, we've been here for a long time. We have stake here. We don't want to just get up and leave. We want to fight for our rights. So people have a hard time giving up their sovereignty when you've died and been mutilated for years and years, and now you're just going to get up and say, oh, now I'm African. So, I think, Sekhmet, it's a discussion that we have to have amongst each other, because it's just kind of one of those things that we don't want to keep talking about in public in terms of how we want to identify ourselves. I honestly don't care if we go with Black or African, as long as we're united. But the problem with this indigenous culture is that most of them follow a faulty methodology, and a lot of the information that they are getting is fragmented, and it doesn't necessarily represent science or the truth, for that matter. So, Black people, Black people, right? Our skin color has its advantages in Africa and in areas where sunlight is, but in Europe, light skin may be indigenous. So, it's a subject that we need to discuss, and I think it's probably a part 3 to that, because so much information. It's like we would have to build.
Well, the part 3 is going to be a mix with you, Unc, and the sisters mixing it up, and that's how we're going to get that in.
Okay.
And it's going to be a body bag.
It's going to be a body bag. But sister Sekhmet, I think you'll do great on this subject that you're talking about, because what you're talking about is epigenetics. So we really probably got to build on that. So to answer your question, yes, being in captivity will change your psychological and physical makeup, and we're constantly going through evolution even today. So that process, if you look at Stockholm syndrome and epigenetics and how slavery changed the DNA of Black people, yes, it has, and it changes from a medical perspective. I talked about type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity. All of these things are a result of being in North America. So, so absolutely, that's something we got to build on because there's a lot of information connected to that as well.
All right, let me say this.
I definitely, real quick, Silena. I definitely would love to have that conversation because I believe when it comes down to the layman terms, you know, our people that are out here just trying to figure out how to survive. If we begin to understand what captivity has done to us physically and mentally, then we can begin to fight it or counteract it and have a clear path on what to counteract. Because right now we're so everything is thrown up in the air and we have so many things that people are looking at and believing. And a lot of us, there's a lot of laymen that don't understand evolution, so we dismiss it. And we don't understand genetics, so we dismiss it. But what do? We still have to take in account that there has been a physical and mental change to us that has changed us from, if you believe that you come from Africa. So I definitely think it's a conversation that we need to have that connects with the genetic and the evolution conversation that we've been having. But to wrap it up quickly, I just want to clarify. So we're saying that the European and us are the same species, but a different population. Am I correct, ladies?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Yes.
That is correct. So for the ones that are out here that say that we're more genetically connected to a European than we are to an African, that would be proven incorrect, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's incorrect.
Yeah, that's how they was able to match Dr. Maat's DNA test with that population in Africa, because African Americans are more like Africans than Europeans.
Europeans, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
What I want to say real quick, because I got a caller on the line waiting, and I want to say I want y'all viewers that's viewing this to really understand what's taking place right now. Look at these sisters. We got 3 beautiful sisters up in the building, and you see that they are highly intelligent. You see, showing you that the sisters can do it even better than the brothers if need be. All right? So therefore, every brother, if your daughter missed this, I think you need to bring your daughter in, let her see the review of the video. Let us see it, because this right here can be a self-esteem booster for the sisters. You know, a lot of young ladies wish they would like to be a Michelle Obama. Ain't nothing wrong with Michelle Obama. Beautiful, intelligent, gorgeous sister. And now they can look at y'all and say, oh, I want to be just as intelligent as these ladies right here. You see? So make sure that you get your daughters, let them see the intelligence of our sisters, and also the sons. So the sons can see that the sisters is also intelligent. All right. So my brother George Macon, you got a question? You got the floor, brother.
Oh man, I wanted to.
Hold on, George. You got the floor. And
this for Dr. Maat.
All right. Hold on. And Dr. Maat, when you finish, you could go right into what you wanted to say. Go ahead.
Okay. Peace, brother George.
I want to first say that, man, I'm glad that we got the ladies on here, man, and just to show respect for each other and discipline. I believe us men watching this, we can learn something from this. You know, the women are being an example, basically, when it shows how we should be behaving. My question would be when we talking about these Neanderthals. And we know that, like their first discoveries is in those Angus caves and then the Rock of Gibraltar. You mentioned was it Richard Leakey? But my problem with a lot of this information that's coming out now is we know that Harry Leakey, which was his grandfather, and Louis Leakey, which was another anthropologist, he was part of the British Eugenics Society. And when a lot of these discoveries was coming into play, this is when you start really having these different groups come out about world domination and creating the dominant man. It was coming up out of these areas, and they were starting this eugenics society, and basically they was what you were saying. They never looked at themselves as us. We were subhuman to them. And all this science and stuff ties in. So when we basically naming these people and we quoting these books,
Did you lose him, Sinetta? I can't hear anybody. Sinetta, I can't even hear you now.
That's because he on mute. He on mute. Sis.
Oh,
You on mute?
Oh, go ahead. I made a mistake and muted him.
I'll start over so she can hear.
No, we got you.
Start over, brother. You were just saying I got you. You were saying that the Leakley family, you said that they were a part of the British eugenics.
Mm-hmm. All I'm saying is these scientists in the last 100 years, these German geneticists, these Jews, these people over in British, because we know the history of Britain and Germany. They was creating these scientific points and basically looking at us as subhuman and putting themselves at the top of the science, at the top of science. How do we take this stuff as gospel now when we know that these people was basically like man fucking scientists, and they was lying about a lot of the theories. I just feel like we quote these people, but we don't talk about the background or who these people were and what they were connected with. Because
so let me ask you a question, brother Macon.
Who these people are, for the science who basically are the ones who created these institutions that we go to school with. And we're not talking about that. We're just going on and saying, well, the Leakey family. I mean, they were in Kenya. I mean, we know what they were responsible for and the things that was going on, but we don't talk about this kind of stuff. We just say, well, these people did this, but they was all connected to that white supremacist dominant society that basically created the education models and the institutions and everything. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
So let me ask you a question. Now I hear what you're saying, brother. I totally hear what you're saying. But first and foremost, we weren't big up in the Leakley family. We were just mentioning Discovery in 1967. Right. So what they were tied to and what they were doing, no one was paying homage to them. It wasn't that. We were simply talking about the discovery of the fossil findings back in 1967. Regardless of what they're tied to, regardless of what they're connected with, they found the oldest fossils of Homo sapiens sapien in the Omo Valley in Ethiopia in 1967. So what was wrong with bringing that concept or that fact to light? What was wrong with that? No, we didn't get into the history of the Leakley. No, let me finish talking, brother.
I'm not saying that.
Let me finish talking, brother.
Hold on, George. Hold on.
Let me finish talking. So no, we didn't go through the history of the Leakley family, who they are, what they're tied to, their politics, their history. No, we didn't get into that.
Because we don't give a shit.
That wasn't relevant to our discussion. We were just saying that they made a fossil finding in 1967, which they did, by the Omo River in Ethiopia. That's it. So I hear what you're saying, brother. You're like, oh, well, you guys are quoting these people, blah, 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 but you're not getting into, who these people actually were, I guess who financed them, where they're from, because we didn't get into it because it's not relevant to our discussion.
Can I just say this before I go? And the reason why I came on here and said that, because when you're talking to a people that's been through trauma, and you're dealing with the people who we don't know who we are, and we're disseminating this information when we know what we've been through as a people, we have to have these type of conversations about these people and the ones who wrote these books. Because if we don't, then I think it's not responsible. These people wasn't for us. These people were devils. They lied about a lot of stuff. So we're not even sure if a lot of this information is even accurate, because a lot of these darn scientists don't even agree on certain things.
Let me ask you a question, brother. What evidence do you have contrary to what we presented? Where's your evidence?
Listen to what I'm saying. I'm not debating. I'm not here to debate you what I'm saying.
No. You said that a lot of the evidence was false. So you said that a lot of the evidence was false. So let me know. Tell me what evidence you have to substantiate that the evidence that we presented was false.
I never said that. This is what I'm saying. See, you taking offense. You're not hearing me. I'm not saying that anything that you said was false. What I'm saying was some of this information that's coming through, we got to talk about who these people were and what they were a part of. That's one thing that we can't get away from.
Right.
And for some reason, you're not talking about that. Somebody said that they don't give a fuck about that. I think that that's irresponsible.
All right, but George, hold on, George. I think what you missing, my brother, is that the topic at hand. The topic, I'm quite sure we all know the wickedness of Europeans, brother.
Right.
Hold on, George, brother. The topic is not about Richard Leakey or none of the Leakeys.
Right.
doing is just giving you an example of what so-and-so have said, or where you can go and get this research from. And that's all we're saying. The topic is not about them. That's why they didn't go into their background. You see, they can do that easily and go rip them a new asshole, but they would be off topic. That's all they're saying, brother.
Let me say this for the listeners, though. I understand that, and I respect Dr. Maat. I'm not on her level on a lot of information. I won't even say that I am. I understand that. But what I'm saying for the listeners, for a lot of people that may not have this information, when I'm listening, I hear the Leaky family, it's my responsibility to my people to bring that up. Now, they can deal with it the way that they see fit, but but that's all I'm saying. Because a lot of our people, we don't know who we are, and we're hurt in so many different ways. That's why we argue and fight so much about so many different things.
Right, can I say something?
Yeah, I just let me finish something. That stop cutting me off.
No,
yeah, that's enough. Is enough for that.
Yeah, I think that it's important. Like one of the things that we want to do, like one of our goals of Armor Raw Squad is that we want to help to bring like scientific literacy to the community. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want to help people to think in the manner that will assist in the decision-making skills. As a therapist, it is very difficult for me to listen to you say that that you feel that it is important to attack someone's character in order to bring correct information to the people. Attacking character, attacking people's lives, that's not how you get people to change, brother. There's no theory or no counseling theory that I know of or skill set that I have that tells me in order for me to get people to change, I have to attack the people that they're using to form their conclusions. That's fear. That's what you learned in the church. You afraid of white people, so you got to teach our black people to be afraid. We're not scared of white people, so there's no need for us to be afraid. All we have to let's listen. All we have to do.
No, stop.
Put him on mute. Put him on mute.
All right, they want to move forward, brother.
Yeah.
Peace and Black Power family. What's your name? Where you calling from?
John from Los Angeles.
Peace, brother John. Do you have a question for the sisters?
Yeah, I had a question about what were their thoughts on the breeding system that the white man had in the South when they had us in slavery, and do they think that changed us genetically? Oh,
good question. I'm gonna say hell yeah, but I'm gonna let the doctors go in on that. That's a part of it, the slow adapting. But go ahead, Dr. Maat.
I'm gonna go and pass that to my sister Nyah.
All right, Dr. Nyah.
I know Brother Ong talks a lot about the interbreeding that happened during the Ma'afa. But Sister Nyah, do you want to take that?
Yeah, and this goes back to the question that Sister Sekhmet was talking about is these changes. I think that, changes did occur. At the did mutations happen at that because of slavery? No, we don't have any evidence that specific mutations occur. But in the study of epigenetics, which is kind of the newest study with genetics, they are showing that changes did occur as a result of chattel slavery. Sorry. And so some of the changes I talked about was the obesity, the type 2 diabetes. You'll notice that Black people die more than other people of stroke and heart attack. So there's a lot of stressors going on with that. So there was definitely some psychological changes. Dr. Joy DeGruy talks about post-traumatic stress syndrome and how that impacts us and how transgenerational poverty still impacts us today. So yes, there were some changes. We don't see any changes on a genetic level yet. But we do see changes in disease susceptibility. So,
so you got to admit that there got to be some type of changes inside of the biological structure, because look, when they are planting their seed and they are putting in their semen into the African woman, which is definitely totally different from the original seed. So we got to admit that there got to be some type of change there, Dr. Nyah.
Well, you remember we all one species, so go ahead, Dr.
I was just getting ready to say something that we got to understand that we're all one species, and remember we're the same population. So you have a population of the members of a population interbreeding with. We're in the same population, so the members within that population are interbreeding. So I'm trying to understand why he thinks a genetic mutation would occur, or genes would occur, or there will be a mutation in genes and chromosomes if you have members of the same population interbreeding with one another. What would cause the change? I mean, I'm lost. Like, right. What would cause the actual change?
We are now debunking the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's theory that he was created in the laboratory. We are debunking that.
No, we don't believe that.
Okay. No, we debunk that. So I'm waiting on Soleimani to call in, because Soleimani believes that the European was created in a laboratory.
Oh my gosh, I laughed. So he believes in the whole Yaku story, that they went in labs and they separate.
Was there a Yaku?
I think it's like the whole Yaku story. I think that's what the Nation of Islam, and this is no diss to the Nation of Islam. I don't want.
Dr. Maat, was there a Yaku? Does Yaku exist or no?
I never heard of Yaku. I don't know of any Yaku, in the history books. So I don't know where they got it from or who this individual is. Sister Nyah, do you know of anybody named Yaku?
No. The story of Yaku is very unknown power story, but to give perspective, a lot of the things that happened to Europeans within Europe was very traumatic, and you got to know that. So when they underwent these changes in Europe, and if you study the history of Europe, you know that their history is really defined by war and brutality, and so there's a psychological component when you have a vitamin D deficiency. It creates a level of aggression. It can create depression. It can create additional violence. So although the story of Yaqub is not correct, some of the psychological patterns that we've seen throughout European history can be specifically can be specifically or is rooted in being in Europe in that cold climate, which is very traumatic,
right?
Overall psychological and emotional development. So
I think that the Yaqub story is another story that we have to use to somehow dress up the fact that the white man is the physical manifestation of evil. We have to somehow dress it up. We have to somehow add something onto it. And instead of just stating that they are evil, they have a propensity. They have a genetic propensity to evil. And since we're
said this as well.
That's correct. That's why I'm saying it. They have a genetic propensity to evil. They have a genetic propensity to non-compassion. They have this, and the reason, and we have it, and we don't have that propensity, and that's why it's so easy for us to be caught up in the brutality of this physical manifestation of evil. So whether you call it the devil, or you call it Yaqub, or you call it a jinn, the Muslims call it a jinn, whatever you may call this, a demon, whatever you may call this, we need to understand that it all comes back to this bastard European that is the physical manifestation of evil, our mortal enemy. He only wants to kill us. He only wants to destroy us. So if you're a Christian, you call him the deceiver. He's the damn deceiver. If you want to call his ass Yaqub, he's the motherfucking Yaqub. If you want to call his ass the jinn, then he's the jinn. But what it comes down to is he is the physical manifestation of evil. He only wants to kill and destroy us because he knows as soon as we realize who we are, we will then begin to defeat his ass.
Right.
Okay. Peace and black power, brother. What's your name? Where you calling from? I can't hear you clear, brother. I cannot hear you. No.
Hold on. Hello?
I hear you clear now. What's up?
Okay. My name is Daryl, also known as Red Sticks. Buffalo's on the user page. I just
I'd like to thank you for this opportunity, first of all, to be able to speak to y'all. My first question that I wanted to ask was about the reason why the like the Negritos and the Australians and Melanesians did not change basically in their color and in their hair texture. Well, more so with the Negritos through this DNA process and stuff, because that's one of the things that I'm trying to learn about, because I'm not really that sharp in DNA, but the other stuff I have a little background. So because I have Aboriginal in my bloodline, and so I wanted to address that.
What's the question, brother? What's the question?
My question is basically, why didn't the why is the Negritos still obviously African in their physical appearance, and also with the Australian and Melanesians? And also, I would like to also talk about the bones of Africans found in this continent that date back to before the Ice Age. Before, one of the Ice Ages.
All right, do y'all understand the question before I hang up?
Yes.
All right, brother, let's listen to the question, the answer.
Dr. Maat, do you have the one slide of the haplogroups and the migration patterns that we can put up?
Yeah,
so you can see?
I'm putting it up right now. Hold on one sec, sis. Here we go.
So when you see the map, basically your skin color is going to be based on your proximity to the equator. So
just let me find the skin map while you explain that. That would make sense, because I know that Brother Wujai will put it up. So do you want the skin map up also, sis? Or
yeah, that'd be great. You can put that up too.
Let me find that. Brother Wujai will had it up. He had it last night. So the skin map. Hold on, sis, because I want to give the family some visual. Here we go. So I believe this is the map he showed. Yes. All right. Here we go. So I'm getting ready to share my screen again. Oh, it says I am sharing my screen. So, okay. So you see my screen, sis?
Yeah, I see it. So, it's going to take, I know most of you guys know geography, but if you look at the continent of Africa, and if you look at this little dark section right between Africa and Arabia, it's a dark section that's called that's considered South Asia. And so the Negritos would have populated in that area, and they would have stayed there for thousands of years. And they would have had a high diet of vitamin D because their proximity to the ocean, and then their proximity to the equator. So they're close to Africa. So that's why they maintain their color. And these Negritos are considered Asian using just a social construct, because as you can see, everyone who came out of Africa interbred with the Dusonian first and then the European. So one the Negritos definitely interbred with the previous human types, which was the Dusonians in that area, and they stayed. Whereas other Asians, if you look at the north part of Asia, you see the skin lightens up the further you go up into Asia. But the proximity basically to the equator is why they were able to maintain their dark skin. You guys are saying the same thing, because I had a conversation with somebody today, so I'm like thinking. So Dr. Maat, you're talking about the historical perspective, and you're explaining why we are the way that we are. Absolutely. And Sagnetta is basically saying this is the solution. We need to fix how we are. We can no longer make
That's all I'm saying.
You guys are both saying the same thing. You're just giving, you and Empress, you guys are giving more context. You want people to know, because it's important in psychology. When people know what's wrong with them, when you identify it and you label what's wrong with them or with what's wrong with their situation, then they're able to fix it because they're aware. So now Sakhmet is saying, now that we are aware, y'all got to get it together. So both of y'all saying the same thing. Both these ideas can exist in the same environment.
I do agree 100% with Empress Sekhmet. Some people can do it. Some people do it different. Empress Sekhmet choose to do it her way. I choose to be open about it. Because, you know, I'm an Aries. I'm that fire sign. So I choose to be open with it, to come out with it, and just be blunt with it. Straight to the goddamn call. So, but my sister, I agree with her. I don't disagree with my sister. I agree with what she's saying.
I think we need to.
I think it's just worse when we kill each other because we too busy looking outside of ourselves for that white man, and let alone that brother that's behind you. He's looking at you. He's jealous of you. He's envious of you. He want what you got. He want to move into what you. He's doing anything to try to take what you got, shut you down, rape your baby, all kind of shit. We got the same shit going on in our community. That's all I'm saying.
Well, let me say this. Let me say this, and I want to say it calmly to all the people out there within the sound of my voice. If you have the courage to love another Black person, understand that you have to love them through over 500 years of trauma that has been embedded now in our makeup. Okay? So if you choose to have the courage to love another Black person, understand we got issues. We got problems. We are a race of special needs. So that's going to take a whole lot of understanding. That's going to take a whole lot of courage. That's going to take a whole lot of second chances. A whole lot of second chances. Now, am I talking about the pedophile, the rapist, the murderer, the one that wants to infest our communities with drugs? No, just make them missing people. We don't got to talk about it. Police ourselves. Have a code that we go by. Police ourselves. Handle that situation. Begin to eradicate those things. But when we talk about people that are backstabbing and backbiter and gossipers and don't know how to love each other, come on now. We got to understand that we're dealing with traumatized people. So if you have the courage to love another Black person, always remember that we have in our genetic makeup now, we have a history of ancestral atrocities that have been committed against us. So we're dealing with damaged goods.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, let me say, family, if you're calling from a unknown caller, you will not be able to get in. So stop calling. I'm not going to let you call in from an unknown caller. If you're scared, get under the bed and hide. If you know my number, I need to know your number. Black Power family. Peace and Black Power family. What's your name and where you calling from? Peace, peace. What's up? Yeah, what's happening? You see, it's getting a little hot, but it's all good. What's up, my brother? Peace, family. What's up, man?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I'm saying what's up to you.
Oh, what's going on, bro? How you doing?
I'm good. What's happening?
Man,
Talk to me, brother. You're live. You got to turn that down on the back, bro. All right. Peace and Black Power, brother. Solar Mind. What's up, man?
Peace. What's going on?
What's happening?
Yeah, it was actually. So, what's going on, Sister Maat?
What's going on, my brother? How are you?
I'm cool, and I got one question for the family.
Let's get it.
So, according to what you were saying, you was basically saying that we are of the same species, but we are from different populations, and that the European is not African.
Right. Yeah. We said that they're not. We said that they're not African. That's our position, brother. And you know, we presented our evidence. And
now you do know you debunking Unk.
No, we're not.
No.
Wait a minute, brother Sanetta. We're not debunking Ankh, and we're not debunking Brother Wujawu, because they said last night that the European is fundamentally, and that's a key word that we have to use, fundamentally or ultimately or essentially, right? And so when they say that the European is fundamentally African or ultimately African or essentially African, they're just saying that at the end of the day, that the European can trace their lineage, you know, haplogroups and all of that back to Africa. And when we showed you the haplogroup map, we showed you how you had L0, L1, L2, L3, and how L3 went out, gave rise to MNN, and how MNN went out and gave rise to the different European haplogroups. Okay. And so that's a key word that you have to use, fundamentally African. We said they're not African, but that doesn't debunk and it doesn't debunk Wujaru, because they use that word fundamentally or ultimately or essentially.
Okay, go ahead, Solomon.
Yeah, it was a little different from what they were saying yesterday. But my question was,
call from unknown caller. To accept, press 1.
Did you hang up on Solomon?
No, sapien or just a different species altogether, because
no, brother,
I'm doing a little bit of reading on it, that even a lot of the scientists kind of debate on that particular issue.
Now, what was the question, brother? I missed it.
He said that he believes, I think, sis, that he's saying that it's his contention that Europeans are a different species. He said altogether, and they're not. And that's why we earlier today, we had to define.
Dr. Maat, he said the Neanderthal. Say it again, Solomon. Hold on.
I was asking a question pertaining to the Neanderthal.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Do you think that the Neanderthal is of a different species, or do you think it's a subgroup of the Homo sapiens sapiens? Because I know that there's some contention even amongst some of the European scientists pertaining to that. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
No, the Neanderthal belongs to the Homo genus. I mean, they also belong to the Homo genus. So I'm gonna.
Yeah. So the Homo neanderthalis is a different species,
right,
from Homo sapiens sapiens,
right,
but we still belong to the same genus. So that means that we were able to breed together. So they were a different species. The Neanderthal.
You think they're different species? I think that Dr. Ma said that they was, right?
No, hold on. Let me show you the slide, brother. That's not what I said. Hold on.
Oh, all right.
This is what we showed earlier today, my brother. So let's put it up. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen, Solomon?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, so what Sister Nyah is saying is that they are a different species, but we belong to the same genus.
Right. So their species is Homo neanderthalis, and we're Homo sapiens sapiens. Homo neanderthalis evolved in Europe, and we evolved in Africa. So yes,
like the crucial part. I think that we have in this whole quest to find out what the cracker is, because I think he's trying to claim, like, certain genes from the Neanderthal. But,
right. And
the question. So
yeah, that's a great question, because that's one of the points of contentions in our community, is that a lot of people in our community teach that the Homo sapien, that the European is a Neanderthal. And so
that's what I believe. I think
right. And I understand, because I've heard the argument a lot, so I knew what you were getting to. So when you look at this chart, you'll see Homo sapiens sapiens. Homo sapiens sapiens is the last living species. Homo Neanderthal died out because basically when Homo sapien went into Africa, you will find, like, when you look at the DNA and the mitochondrial DNA of Europeans, the part of the Neanderthal DNA that transferred from us to them is not on the XY chromosome. So it's very important. It's on an autosomal level, and it has to do with the skin. So most of the stuff that was transferred had to do with the skin and the adaptation of humans in Europe. So they took upon those traits that allowed them to survive. But as it relates to the XY chromosome, none of that was transferred from us. In fact, the Homo sapien female could not have even carried a Neanderthal child to birth. So there was only 2 incidents where they had a successful offspring, and that happened once in Asia and once in Europe. So Europeans are definitely Homo sapiens sapiens, but they are an admixture of both Homo sapiens sapien and Neanderthalis. So they're not completely Homo Neanderthalis. So that's, so part of what you're saying is correct. And I think a lot of people share that same belief, but it's just not true. Europeans are definitely the same species, because at the end, when Homo sapien went into Europe, Neanderthal was dying off. So the Neanderthal male had become sterile.
It was a theory that was being posed, because they kind of go back and forth as to what their position is on the Neanderthal, and it was the main theory is that they were kind of absorbed in the population of the Homo sapiens sapien.
All right, we got to get to the next caller. I'm sorry, Nyah.
All right,
I want to get to the next caller because I want to get out of here.
Yeah, that was true. We would see it on the XY chromosome. We don't see any the XY chromosome of humans is a Homo sapiens sapien. It's not Neanderthal. We would definitely see it if that was true.
All right, peace and Black Power family. What's your name? Where you calling from? Nelson.
Hello?
What's happening, my brother?
Oh, peace, son. That is Nelson from Brooklyn. Nelson and Power from Brooklyn, man.
What's going on, man?
I'm going to start off by saying I give thanks to the Queen for presenting the work, excellent job done. They set the standard in comparison to the men. The men, the way they carry themselves. I feel like they did a far better job. Not to create opposition, but I feel like they did a great job. But my question is geared towards the Luzia woman who was found in Brazil in 1975. And they said that she dates back, her skeleton was found with, I would say, maybe 108 other specimens, respective specimens. And they said she dated back to 11,000 years ago. And I just want to know if anyone has information on her and her migration pattern.
Okay, Dr. Maat, Dr. Nyah, Sister Sekhmet. Did y'all hear the question?
No, repeat that for me, Sarnetta.
Really fast. Repeat that, brother. She didn't hear it. Listen up.
Okay, now my question is geared towards the Luzia woman. She was found 11,000 years ago. No, she was found in 1975, 11,000 years ago. And her specimen was found along with 108 other respective skeletons. And some forensic scientists, I believe at Oxford University, they did a reconstruction of her face, and she had Negroid features. So I just want to know if anyone has any information on the Luzia woman, her migration pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about in South America, Lucia?
Yes, found in Brazil in a Brazilian cave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what information specifically are you looking for in terms of her DNA? So when they
get there, who does she migrate from? Because they said she was an immigrant, but I just wanted to know if anyone had any information on her migration path. How did she get there? Did she come across the Atlantic, or did she come through Alaska and then migrated down? Because some people say how you can't go from white to black, but she had melanin skin. So if she came through the Alaskan Peninsula from over by Asia, then how did her skin get? How did she get darker? And if not, then where did she come from? How did she get there? Over her migration patterns.
Dr. Maat, do you have that chart? I'm sorry, I keep putting it up. Because...
All right, thanks, brother. Let's listen in. All right.
All right. Which one, sis? The taxonomy chart or
the mitochondria haplogroup chart? Because that kind of tells. Yeah. So we always want to go to that migration pattern, because the migration pattern. Okay, let's see. So you got right here, if you look at the screen where you see Lucia, you're going to see her inside the Americas. You see B, A, C, D in the yellow. So the first Americans, there's 2 distinct populations of first Americans. The one group went into the Bering Strait, and they were stranded there for about 15,000 years. And another group took a coastal route. Scientists believe that Lucia might have took this coastal route. If you see this B haplogroup going across upper northern Asia, into this coastal route into the Americas. So you see that she was in South America and then she went into the Americas. So she likely took the coastal route because within a Native American population, there's two groups. There's the group that may have took the coastal route and the group who's definitely stuck on the Virgin Strait. And you see that they got this AD and they still maintain dark skin because of vitamin D. So Lucia would have went through the coastal route. And she, if you look at her DNA, she's closely related to current day Native Americans and current day Aboriginal Australians who represent the very first out of African experience. So if you see the Australians, you'll see them in this CD group, and they kind of traveled up through Europe into Asia. So yeah, so she came through the coastal route of through South America into South America. Now she would have been dark because of course she's close to the equator and her diet would have been high in vitamin D. But in terms of her Africanness, she would not qualify as an African because again, an African would be the people who stayed in Africa, not the people who left. Everyone outside of Africa originates from this N group. So you see L3 and then you have N. Everyone outside of Africa can be traced to N. I'm L2. I'm not part of L3. I'm part of L2. Dr. Maat is part of L1, I think. So everyone outside of Africa traces to N. So she left Africa and she went through all these migrations, all these environmental changes, all these mutations. She encountered so many problems. And once she gets there into South America, she maintains her color because she likely kept the coastal route and didn't go deep inside those very cold areas in those caves. So that's where she came from. Did that make sense, Dr. Maat?
Yes, and I was going to say, you said N and also M, right? Because I'm looking at the chart and it looks like some like M.
Oh, yeah.
It was M and N, basically.
Yeah, so it's M and N. So you see how M is she stays in the coastal. You see how M kind of goes over, and she stays in a coastal. And this 48,000, this is Australia. What is this little continent right here? Is this green thing, M42Q? Is that
that's Australia?
Yeah, okay, Australia. I just want to make sure. So you see how they went. This is why Australians are they think that they are the oldest, because you see how they just stayed on that coastal route. So you'll see these Negritos and all these dark-skinned, short African people, Papua people, they are closer to the Australians. But you can see how they're also connected to this B migration into the Americans. So all Native Americans are connected to this M442. So
all right, so now y'all, we at the closing part. I got one last caller, and then I'm going to ask all three of y'all sisters to close out. And so, peace and black power to my brother Tahuti, all the way up in California. What you want to say, my brother?
First, I want to say peace to the people. I think the show was an excellent show. I mean, it was perfect. And so my question to the panel is, how can we begin to take this information and implement it into the school curriculum? Or are you guys doing anything now?
Yes. Let me go get something. Let me get something. I got something for you.
And listen to the answers.
All right, thank you. Good question, because Dr. Maat is in school every goddamn day teaching.
Yeah, I use the information mainly in psychology. I use Amos Wilson because basically you have the conscious and you have the unconscious. Anytime things are below the conscious and you're unaware of, it can impact you negatively. So what I try to do is educate kids on history and African history specifically in migration, because this gives them a sense of self-esteem and belonging and awareness. So it's very important to the psychology of African kids that we educate them on our history, because your psychology is always present. History is always present in your mind. But when you don't have history, then you are more prone to violence. You're more prone to illiteracy. You're more prone to teen pregnancy. You're more prone to other things that can tear down your community. But when you know your history and your legacy and who you are, you're able to have a greater sense of self and a greater sense of community. So that's how I use it.
Absolutely, Sister Nyah. And just to piggyback off of what you just said, I'm gonna show the viewers something. Now I'm gonna be fast, brother Sinetta, because I know you.
He ready to go to sleep.
He's ready to go. So you were talking about self-knowledge and how, teaching our babies who they really are and where we come from, how that will boost their self-esteem, and it'll also curb the violence in the youth. Look at this. Earlier today, and I don't know if people can see the camera. Sister Nyah, can you see what I'm holding up?
Yeah, real good.
Yeah.
Okay, so earlier today, I don't know if you guys can see this particular woman in the back. This woman right here, that's our State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby here in Baltimore. We had a meeting with her today because what we're trying to do is partner up and utilize the Meltrack program. So you say, what are we doing? What are we doing? We're producing books for our babies, teaching them this information. We're also producing.
Exactly. Is that a new book? Because it looks thicker now.
And yes, Dinetta. So this just came out. Look at these images. Oh my God, you're talking about out of Africa theory and stuff like that. Look at what we're teaching.
I want you to let the people know where to get that at when you leave. Don't forget.
Okay, I definitely will. Hold on, I'm trying to give the folks some. Look at this. Look at this. World maps right here. I don't know if people can see it. But yeah, we have books that are teaching our babies this information, who we are, where we come from. We talk about, Africa being the cradle of humanity in this particular book. We talk about it in this particular film. And the Out of Africa theory that Sister Nyah and I explained today on this panel. You can do it right here. Meltrack episode 2, exploring the pre-Columbian Americas. We explained the Out of Africa theory in this film. And sign that, I don't know, we can play a clip, but I mean, if they want it. But
right there, I see the Olmecs in the background.
You see the Olmecs, you see all of it, the Native Americans and all that. So
let me ask you, Doctor. Some of our people are saying, how come I see a blonde-haired girl on the cover? Break that down.
Here we go. And they always say that, Sister Nyah. Now look at this. When you see the cover, you see 4 black people, don't you, Nyah? You see 4 Africans, right? And then you see 1 European girl and you see an Asian guy, right? So people would think, honestly, Sinetta, that this film promotes, they would say multiculturalism, but it doesn't. Right. It doesn't. It has a diverse face. Yes, it does. But the information is all African centered, 100% guarantee. It was a strategy that we used to get this in the public school system. That's our ultimate goal. We want to reach Black children wherever you are. The Meltrack program is being implemented in Europe right now, in Canada, Europe, on the continent. The Meltrack program is being executed, and that was our overall. It's actually in the library in Canada right now, brother Sinetta. And so that was our goal. So when people first look at this, they see the diverse cover, they say, oh, this is multiculturalism, but it's not. The entire continent is, the content is totally African centered. All right. Totally African centered. We don't focus on Europeans at all. We don't focus on Asians at all. In fact, in Meltrack episode 3, we're working on that right now. Meltrack episode 3, we will be exploring the African diaspora. So we're going to talk about the Europeans and the Portuguese. And when they first came over to Africa and West Africa, when did they snatch the first African, which was in 1441? That's when they snatched the first 12 Africans. Then we're going to get into 1444. We're going to talk about the slave ports. We're going to talk about the whole Ma'afa in Meltrack episode 3. And so I'm telling you, that I'm very pumped up about this project. And
how do we get a hold of that? Like if we wanted to order some of that right now, the books to show our children, how do we order that?
Okay, so you go right here. Let me share my screen. Sinetta, can you see my screen, brother?
Yes, we see it.
All right, go right here to edanimeproductions.com. I'm bringing it up, edanimeproductions.com. If you go to, look at this, if you go to shop, we have books. We had the digital download version for our films. I held up the DVDs, but the films are also available in digital download format. So we have books, we have films. Even our books are available for digital download. So you go right here to edanimeproductions.com. Sinetta?
He's still there.
Yes, I'm here. I see it. Powerful.
Yeah, so the brother, that's what we're doing. We're teaching our babies. We're educating our babies with the information that we learn.
And to me to answer the brother's question, everybody knows my fundamental foundations right now is teaching our people self-sufficiency and how to circulate the black dollar. So that means, growing our own food, harvesting our own food, making our own clothes, learning how to filtrate our own water, learning how to be our own safety net. As it is right now, as much as we can say we can hate this European or we hate this oppressor. If he decided to take away his amenities, what would we do? Me and Dr. Maat have this conversation all the time. What would we do if he decided to shut your water off or decided to shut your electricity off, or, so many different things. So my teaching every day, and what I'll be teaching tomorrow morning is self-sufficiency, how to grow our own food, how to harvest our own food. We have women teaching how to make our own clothes, teaching our children how to be self-defense and police ourselves. So, we don't have to call on the person or the people that oppress us for our protection. And this is the life that we live right now. We say we hate the white man, but if something happens to us, who do we call? We call the white man. We say that we hate the white man, but we all on cracker YouTube. We're looking for people, black folks that are willing to spend money with one another, circulate the black dollar, begin to make our own networks, begin to make our own programming, begin to make our own and circulate our own dollar so we can begin to be self-sufficient as a people.
Right. And that's what's up, man. A lot of people talk a lot of smack, but these sisters that I have here today, all three of them, dynamic, all three of them are doing the work. I already know what Empress does. I speak to her damn near all the time. When I call her, she's either on the truck giving food out. You heard her earlier. She got like 200 more people to feed.
Yeah,
so she out here doing the work. And I want you, Dr. Maat, to close out for us. And we're going to run down the list. Before you close out, let me say this. Damn, where's my curse at? All right, here we go. Let me say this real quick. Tomorrow, I have Professor James Smalls, Brother Jabari, Rob Bourne, and Divine Prospect. And tomorrow's topic is going to be about the Aborigines. So we're going to let Professor James Smalls have the floor and teach. And he will open up for question and answers. Anything the brothers got, they can bring it to Professor Smalls while we got him in the building. But here's the fallback. This will only be for my Patreons. I'm only giving this shit to my Patreons. I don't care. They deserve this. This one, see, I'm going to save the good shit for my Patreons because they deserve this. So this is going to the Patreons. I will be getting it up early tomorrow. No doubt y'all will be having this on Patreon. All right? So see y'all tomorrow, Patreon, and I think I will be live streaming it on Patreon. Okay? So go ahead, Dr. Maat. You can close out.
Wait 1 second, sis. Let me say to the people, if you enjoyed the show with the sisters tonight, go to the SignetterTVAwards.com and vote for Dr. Maat. Vote for Sister Nyah. Vote for the Empress. We are all nominees of a Signetter TV award. So July 7th, be in the building. If you're not there, it's going to be a movie. If you're not there, you're not going to be where it's at. But show love to the sisters. Show love to us and go give us a vote for our work and our due diligence, because we want our flowers now. We don't want them when we dead.
All right. Dr. Maat, take it away, baby girl.
Yes, King. I just want to thank you for, bringing all of the sisters together and having this build. I think this build was very powerful. I want to acknowledge, and I was texting Sister Nyah, I told her she did a wonderful job, but I want to publicly state to her that she did a wonderful job tonight. This is really her lane, okay? I'm a STEM person all the way. I'm an engineer, so we can get into the math. Again, I do have a science background, but my thing is engineering. So I'm a STEM person, but she has really done a lot of research in this particular area. And I just want to acknowledge her publicly and thank her publicly and tell her that she just did a wonderful job. And I want to acknowledge her publicly. Sis,
I second that.
Yes, sis, you killed it. You killed it, sis. So I was just here as like I was her wing woman tonight.
You helped me out.
I was her wing woman tonight, you know, and this is really her lane. So I just want to say, sis, that you did an awesome job, sis. And Sister Empress Sekhmet, as always, love when you come through, sis. Love the energy. You know, soon as you start talking, I get energized.
Me too.
I get energized instantly when you get on the call. So, sis, I want to thank you for, you know, for stopping through tonight. I want to thank everyone who's in the chat room who stayed and hung. I know that we had like 400 or 500 viewers, and I believe that that number is still at about 400. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, because you could have been doing anything else, but you chose to tune in to Sinetta TV Studios and participate in the build with the sisters. So I want to thank you for coming out tonight and listening to the build. So I don't have anything else to say, Sinetta. I want to tell them, get their mail trek. You know, I got to plug mail trek. Get your mail trek. Get your mail trek. I mean, because we talk about being conscious, right? But then you sit your child in front of the TV to consume films produced by Disney, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Nick Jr., and all of these other networks that are filling our kids' heads with poison. You get what I'm saying? So when we talk about being conscious, I mean, we have to start changing our lifestyles, and being, you know, and protecting our children's minds should be our primary responsibility. Just as parents, we have to protect, you know, our children's minds, and we have to be the predominant molder and shaper of the minds of our children. So what do your children watch? You say you're conscious, but they're watching Disney. You say you're conscious, but they're watching Nickelodeon. Tune in, get your mail trek. Also get your Tell Me Who I Am by Kid Positive. Kid Positive also has books and things of that nature. Get your books by Akua Agassi. Okay. But that's all I have, Sinetta.
Make sure you bring a box with you for the Sinetta TV Awards. I'm going to allow you to go ahead and vend. You good. You got the green light.
Okay, that'll work, Sinetta. And Sinetta, I'm going to publicly ask you this. Earlier today, I said, Sinetta, I said, I want you to bring on my son, Isaiah, to do this presentation to talk about slavery, what started the slave trade. And he's going to go back to 1441. I think that would be a powerful build.
Isaiah is deep. I already watched him. Is that the same brother that was on the field show?
Yes.
Oh, I love that brother. I love him. Awesome.
Thank you so much. So he has a wonderful presentation on the Portuguese and the British and French and Dutch enslavers. And we're going to build Mel Trek episode 3 based on his research. All right. So I think it would be nice to have him on to talk about it.
Okay, no doubt. Sister Empress is on you, sister.
You know, I just want to say, Black people, I love you. And your situation will never trump your purpose. Understand that your situation will never trump your purpose. No matter what you're going through, no matter what you've been through, you still have a purpose. You still have a purpose. And you can still be great no matter what. We've been hurt. We've been victimized. We've been downtrodden. But it's time to stand up. Black people, it's time to stand up. It's time for us to love each other, support one another. It's time for us to begin to circulate our black dollar with one another. Let's stop the hate with one another. The ones that need to be root them out, let's root them out.
That's right.
And the ones that need to be healed, let's heal. So I want to say to Shalom Israel, Islam to the Moors, peace and black power, Aboriginal power, Hebrew power, Moor power, Muslim power, all of that. All of my black people, I love you. And understand that we have to unite if we're going to win. Your situation will never trump your purpose.
Empress Sekhmet, call me in 10 minutes when we off, all right?
All
right. Sister Nyah is on you. Sister Nyah. Where are you?
Here I am. I'm sorry. I really appreciate the bill. Dr. Maat just came in and she was just like my point guard. So I do appreciate it.
First of all, let me say this real quick. I'm all the way downtown. I'm on 31st Street and 5th Avenue this morning. I bumps into Infedici in Manhattan, way downtown. I gets a call from Sister Nyah. I see Nyah calling me early in the morning. I'm like, yo, what's going on, Sister Nyah? How you doing? She immediately started attacking me. Brother, how do you have Unc and all of them on the show, and you gonna bring me on the show to talk about this? I said, oh my God, I got that. I said, you know what, Nyah? I will bring you on today. And definitely she said, oh, she called me back, I think, right? And said, can you please make sure you got Empress Sekhmet? Make sure you got Dr. Maat. I said, all right, I got it. Don't worry about it. And that's why we are here today, because my sister hit me up and said, son, you got to have us on there dealing with this. And I'm glad I did, because y'all did an excellent job.
Thank you, Brother Sonny.
So go ahead, Sister Nyah.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that a lot of times we have this conversation, and a lot of us, we get tired of talking about race, but part of the reason that we have to talk about race is because most of our history has been marred by racialized thinking. As Africans, we are humanists. I mean, we love culture, we love each other, we love to be part of a community. We have to remove racialized thinking from our community and focus on our culture, our legacy, and our history, because we are resilient people. And so we have to tap into that energy, and we can't let tribalism and race and all those other things disunite us. We have to stay united. We have to come together. We got to support each other. And more importantly, we got to know who we are, which is important to the psychology of African people.
Okay, that's what's up. And Minister Inky is also, he sent me a text just now, so he been watching. He said this topic is getting hot, especially the sisters was very professional and honest. Even though they came for me, I like them all. especially Dr. Maat. So
yeah, they can get that work too. They can get that work.
Right. We coming for you, Inky. We coming for you.
Let me show Inky a picture real fast. Hold on.
All the brothers, I hope y'all learned something today. You didn't see not one time did these sisters snap on each other, call them any names. They dealt with the topic, and they was respectful. You can learn from that, y'all.
Right. And if y'all want this work, just call us up.
Just come get it.
Hey, look, hold on. I got to show y'all a picture. Hold on.
Right,
you call, we come.
Hey, look, this is what I was thinking about when you said when you call, you come. Hold on. I might change this to like my screensaver. Hold on. There we go. There we go, Empress Sekhmet.
Uh-oh, Inky.
That's for Minister Inky right there.
Oh, you see that, Minister? Yeah. All right, family. If y'all not subscribed to my Sonetta Patreon page, here's the link. All it is $5 a month, family. That's all I'm asking for. It's $5 a month, because I'm gonna tell you, you want to get on it now. Be a chess player and get the Sonetta Patreon now, because I'm telling you, I'm gonna be slowly going live on my Patreon. I'm gonna slowly start giving the people because they've been getting at me. Trust me, my Patreons been banging on me, telling me, "Sir, what's going on?" I'm a unsubscribe because you're not feeding us enough. So they are rightfully so. They are paying me once a month, so I'm gonna be giving the information to them. All right. So thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate. I got love for all my sisters. You, Dr. Maat. I can't wait to see y'all.
I love you, Dr. Maat, but I'm not shaving my head.
No, I ain't shaving my head.